Hello and welcome to this omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a friend of mine to choose a Doctor Who story and then I will watch and commentate along and try to see if I can guess what their favourite things about each episode might be.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and a big thank you to Toby for inviting me on to Happy Times and Places to talk about one of my favourite stories from Doctor Who. My name is Frazer Gregory. I am a full-time Doctor Who fan and have been ever since the Daleks came up the stairs after Sylvester McCoy in Remembrance of the Daleks. I'm now a part-time podcaster. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me on The Diamond Be Praised, Gallifrey's Most Wanted, Doctor Who Literature with Jason Miller, the Trap One podcast, but mostly you will find me on A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife with my good friends Joe Ford and Simon Hart. I'm also on Twitter as @FelixFrazer, Fraser spelled with a Z, or one word, if you would like to see my ramblings about Doctor Who on there. Today I have come to discuss my favourite story from season 18 of Doctor Who, which is Meglos. Meglos, for some reason, isn't highly thought of by a lot of people, and don't fully understand why, because to me it is just a big, huge slice of fun. Obviously we know that John Nathan Turner made a concerted effort to move away from the humour of the Douglas Adams and Graham Williams era of season 17 when he took over, and I think that leads season 18 to be a little bit dry in places and a little bit poor-faced, and that just makes Meglos stand out as just a beacon of fun. It's just one last hurrah from that Graham Williams era. It's just very Douglas Adams-esque, right down to that Earthling who could just basically be Arthur Dent by the end. So there's just so much to love in it as well. It's packed full of great performances. It's a really quite funny script. The pacing is great. It just zips along. It's a zingy little story you can just pop on and enjoy really quickly at any time. So without further ado, let's dive into Meglos. Enjoy the treats within there, and we'll come back and discuss what my favourite things are about the story. Thanks be to Ty.
Well, hello, my darlings, and welcome to... Why have I started like that? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Hello, everybody. Lovies, darlings, wonderful people out there listening to Happy Times and Places. Here am I, Toby Haydock, trying to inject a bit of joy into your lives or to your appreciation of Doctor Who, or if your lives are already full of joy and your appreciation of Doctor Who is also already at the apex of bonhomie and appreciation, then I've just come to either match you or top you up or whatever you want. Anyway, as you'll know by now, I hope, unless this is your very first one, this is a podcast in which I watch a Doctor Who story buoyed up by a friend, colleague, fellow fan, sometimes combination of all three, who has something nice to say about a story. And I have to guess what those things, one per episode and one bonus, are, whilst also commentating along and dropping in some truth bombs and some observations. By truth bombs, I mean obscure facts about actors generally, or childhood reminiscences that I do hope strike a chord, or at least give an indication of what it was like to be a fan at a certain point in time. For me, I started watching with a repeat of The Invisible Enemy and have not stopped since. Frazer, I don't really know. To be fair, I've come to know Frazer through the world of podcasts, and very much enjoy listening to him on Hamster with a Blunt Penknife with the lovely Joe Ford. And through when we were talking, I don't know how it came about, but anyway, Frazer is the first person to give me a season 18 story. I had loads of people sign up to season 18 stories, some of them may be listening now. They probably aren't. But who have claimed those tales, but have not yet recorded their. In fact, they were all taken fairly early on, but nobody recorded their entries apart from Meglos, which wasn't taken. Frazer took it anyway, and he was the last to claim a season 18 story, but the first person to send me in a contribution. Now I've since had a Leisure Hive, and I've since had a Keeper of Traken. Those people who did those stories have now given me their contributions, but I feel I should honour Frazer first, even though, as I'm sure will be discussed, this is not your typical season 18. So we might get to another season 18 sooner rather than later, because I try and mix up the styles of stories that I bung out for these things. So anyway, shall we see what I make of Meglos, and then we'll see what Frazer makes of Meglos, and the keen observers amongst you will note whether we're in accord or not. So I'm going to press play in... Oh, now this is interesting, because my robot lady speaker thing is no longer seeing eye to eye with my Fire Stick. So I've moved over to another device that I've stolen from my partner's other room, which is one that she uses when she's bathing and stuff like that. So it's a waterproof one. But I can't actually tell it what to do. So we've had to retire that poor old robot lady speaker. The future doesn't last very long. Do you know what I mean? In the old days, you had a television that you pressed the buttons on and it made the sound come out and it showed you the pictures. And occasionally you'd see black bars appear on the top or the bottom, and they'd get larger and larger as you knew your television was getting breakier and breakier. And occasionally there was talk of people's tellies blowing up. But this modern stuff, there seems to be something goes wrong every blooming day. Every time I try and relax and just go, this is sometimes known to be a plaintive cry out of this house of, I just want to watch the television. So I may actually have to turn the volume down manually. I'm going to have to do that. So, I mean, obviously there'll be an edit, but I'm going to go and have to turn the sound down on this. Oh, the humanity. Turn the sound down manually on the speakers, like an old timer. God, what else am I going to have to do next? Now I'm going to have to walk to London and write a letter to my beloved. Anyway, so I'm just going to do that. Cool. So there we are, and I've just had to, boil water in a pot and use a mangle to dry my clothes, and also manually sort out the volume of what I'm about to watch and listen to, which is Meglos, which is a story I will have watched actually on a black and white portable television, which is the thing we had in the olden days, because the first Doctor Who episode I saw in colour at home was episode 2 of The Two Doctors. So don't let these poncy velvet tones deceive you into thinking I'm somehow from posh stock. We didn't get a video machine until episode 1 of Time and the Rani, and I didn't watch Doctor Who in colour until episode 2 of The Two Doctors. My mum had other priorities, and they weren't in getting surround sound and 4K HD colour. That didn't exist then, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I would have watched this in black and white, but it's funny because I don't remember the stories being in black and white. And in fact, there's one episode of this I'm pretty sure I watched at somebody else's house, but I can't quite remember now. Anyway, let's get into it. It's funny the little quirks that we have, though, where it's not just about, oh, I watched this Doctor Who story. It's where I was or what we had in our lives at that time. That's why it's such a powerful tool, because it's a sort of anchor within, if not key moments, like I've just done one recently. I did Remembrance of the Daleks, and there's a key moment there. My grandfather died. But it anchors us in little, oh, we had that telly then, or that was the pet that we had, or that was the room of the house that the telly was in, because we actually changed the room. By the time all my brothers and sisters had left home, the house was so cold, my mum and me watched telly in the kitchen because there was an Aga, and that's what kept that room warm. So why would you warm the rest of the house when you've already got a room that is constantly warm because an Aga is constantly on? So we did actually move. Anyway, I'm sure none of that is of interest to anybody, but I think, you do sometimes get flashes of, oh, I watched that story in that room. I remember the room I was in when I watched my first ever episode of Doctor Who, and I remember the room I was in when I watched the Two Doctors, because that was when we'd got that new colour telly, and that anyway, interesting. Right. So anyway, I would guess what room we were in when we watched Meglos, but I do have a feeling I watched at least one at a school friend's house. But it doesn't matter. It's Doctor Who. It's Doctor Who and the Meglos. And we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Oh, look at that. I could just do that with my fingers without having to shout at anybody. So this was still a relatively new... I still think of this Starfield title sequence with Tom Baker's face in particular. Well, I see it as new, but also as unusual with Tom Baker's face, because obviously we got used to it much later with Davison and Colin Baker. But the Starfield and Tom Baker is quite an unusual one because it's so short-lived, I guess. But it felt like a modern, spangly interloper into the far better, because it was the one I grew up with, Bernard Lodge, TARDIS Time Tunnel one. That is still my favourite, I think. Tom Baker is looking quite gaunt and thin, isn't he? But I like that he has, he's got half of his costume off and he's got an apron and he's getting up to stuff in the TARDIS. TARDIS scenes in Doctor Who at this time were very much, part of its make. You expected a TARDIS scene, really. I've got a feeling I missed the beginning of Meglos because I remember not quite knowing where the Earthling had turned up from, and then when I got the book, because this was one of the few Target books I got of stories that I'd seen, and I think I maybe got it because it was the only one in the school bookshop or something, but I'd got it as a sort of, because I wanted to get a Doctor Who book and there weren't many options, because it wouldn't have been a go-to because I had seen it, and if I had seen it, I was less interested, even though I'd only seen it once. I was less interested than in, stories of yore that were marvellous and from the golden olden age, even though I enjoyed Meglos as a kid. And I have to say, I have some sympathy with Frazer, in that I too found season 18 quite dour, and I certainly didn't see this as a different kind of story from the others. It's certainly of a lower quality story. I remember thinking it was quite exciting, and I didn't read that the General Grugger and co were sort of humorous characters, but then when I was older and I started collecting on video, it was definitely, Meglos was definitely, this is the kind of duffer of season 18. And I think it probably is, and for some of the reasons that are oft talked about. But I still think it's great fun. And I have to, now I like these special eye medicine. That's just a nice little attention to detail, the sort of medical attention given to that extra. And this is lovely lighting here in this part of Tigella, which where we're seeing what's going on, on this planet that is rather now sort of humorously rendered, i.e., if you've got hair like that, you're a scientist. If you've got the hats on, you're religious, and there's no nuance in anyone's beliefs. One set believe in one thing, one set believe in the other, and they argue about it, but only using two speaking actors. It's and quite how Zasta fits in is anybody's guess. Well, I don't believe in God, but I haven't got that sort of hair, so I'm leader. Although he does say he's a believer later, doesn't he? wonderful to see Jacqueline Hill. And I remember her, but I hadn't realised, of course, because I was, however old I was, 6 or 7 when this was on, I hadn't realised that was Barbara. In fact, did I even know? I didn't know who. No, I'd have known of Barbara because I'd got the books. But I'd never seen a Hartnell story at this point. And it has to be said, I was talking to somebody about this today. Shakespeare does this where, countries or peoples or sects or whatever, or political factions will be represented by one person who kind of, who is a spokesperson, mouthpiece / representation of the whole lot. And it's a necessary compromise of television and drama. Oh, she just said compromise too, where all of the Dions will be represented by Jacqueline Hill and all of the savants by Crawford Logan as Diedrichs. Although Caris, they get 2 speaking actors, whereas the Dions only get 1, so you can tell whose side the writers are on. I think Jacqueline Hill is very good. But this is sort of children's drama planet representation, isn't it? Where you've got these 2 factions, very broadly drawn, and it is sort of slightly reminiscent of the worst of Star Trek as well, where it's sort of rather ponderous people arguing very sincerely with each other about stuff that's just made up. And that's a lovely line about the Doctor seeing the universe, seeing the strands that join the universe together and mending them while they break. Poor old Edward Underdown, who was, this has been covered in a lot of what is talked about with Meglos, was a handsome and dignified actor in his day, and is a bit poorly now when making this, and so as a result is a bit sort of stiff and wooden, and he doesn't do anything wrong, but he's kind of underpowered, really. It's and it's the kind of part that it's not a great. The part doesn't really help either. But yeah, no. As a kid, I actually think I probably found this more fun than the sort of maths in a lay-by or even something like Keeper of Traken, which I think is hugely admirable now, but seemed sort of slightly slow and poetic, whereas I wanted sort of action adventure and obvious bad guys, and this has obvious bad guys. It's got the spiny cactus guy and it's got the space pirate chaps. It's funny. I wonder how people, because I know people don't like David Tennant and Billy Piper when they're very sort of confident and holding hands, but the Doctor and Romana, they are quite smug, aren't they? Well, I think Romana is a little bit, but I don't mind it at all. I think it's quite fun, and I think Lalla Ward is quite, has a sort of perky energy about her, and I mean this is attempting an interesting conversation about the difference between science and religion, and with all the schisms that are currently ripping apart our discourse. There is very little nuance in these 2 arguments that are being presented. You think, you wouldn't have such unnuanced arguments in real life, and you go, well, actually we do these days. And I love the way that Jacqueline Hill does her then where when she's and it's a real unfortunate thing for the scientists where they're going, this is not a heavenly thing, it's scientific, it's man-made, but they have no explanation as to where it came from. And that's the interesting thing about faith, actually. I'm not a religious person, but I'm not as dismissive of religion as some of my tribe, because I actually think religion takes a slight effort of the will, which I always think is laudable, but it also takes an element of humility that I have to say some of my atheist brethren do not have. There's nothing more tiresome, I think, than a militant atheist. It strikes me as common sense that it's unlikely that there's a deity out there, especially as different cultures have come up with their own versions of the same thing, and it just happens that what ours would be right because of where we were born. That it strikes me as just fairly unlikely. But anything where you sort of humble yourself and are less important to a code of ethics that has been dictated by a divine being, means that we all know, yes, how badly religion has manifested itself in various societies, and it's been used as a tool for everything, segregation and the protection of the powerful, etc. But also, it also has prompted very selfless acts, great charitable acts, great cohesions in societies, and so I understand where religion comes from, and I understand that it can definitely be a force for good, and I think and also yes, science is very important, and scientific rigor is very important, but also science can be very badly used and applied and mishandled. So it's opening up a very interesting argument, albeit in very, very basic terms, but that's because it's Doctor Who. Now, here we have General Grugger and co, and their slightly fringy CSO hair and beards. Stick-on beards are a thing. I was going to say you don't get much anymore, but I watched the first episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds last night, and that's got a stick-on beard. So actually, stick-on beards still get plenty of work. This scene sync technology is rather marvellous. I like these screens, and I like the fact they have a little play with it on this establishing stuff of the gas tax, where they walk round one and behind one and scratch the surface of one. They're not just going, we're using this scene sync to get these small models of these screens to tower over actors who are in real life much taller than they are, but we're going to get them to interact in a way that's going to show this technology is really, really working. Now, obviously, that CSO fringing is not really up to scratch today, but I think it's pretty reasonable, and I like the fact you see the shadows on the planet's surface, and as I say, that they walk round. Those screens, and that you can have a sort of wide shot and a moving shot because of all the synchronization. That's some quite bad CSO bleeding there, but I'm into that. I think that's good fun, and it means that it gives this story its own unique sort of USP. Yes, a USP is a unique selling point, but it's its own particular visual style that is something that can, when you go think about Meglos, you go, oh well, it's it's the one with Scene Think as well as the one with Spiny Face Doctor and blah blah blah. They are comedic villains. There's nothing wrong with a comedic villain. There's a danger when you have a comedic villain, because if the villains are too stupid, they're not a threat, but they're pretty amoral, and that they'll. And I quite like the fact that they're not. I love that musical sting as well. And Bill Fraser's wonderful piratical eyes. I mean, they're giving a performance all on their own. By the way, I don't know. I haven't read the info text on the Blu-ray. I think the DVD gets it wrong, though. Certainly, all the paper accounts of Meglos I've seen say that Christopher Owen, the Earthling, does the voice of Meglos. He doesn't. It's this guy, Crawford Logan. Crawford Logan is a very experienced, Scottish as it happens, radio actor. He played Paul Temple on the radio, and he is Diedrichs, and he is in none of the scenes with the plant and the pirates and the Earthling, whereas Christopher Owen as the Earthling is in the scenes with them. So it's not very practical that he would be doing the voice of Meglos. So I see why people would think he would, because there's some dialogue that he has that is treated where it's the Meglos speaking through the Earthling, for sure. But when the plant is talking, when it's the plant, that is not Christopher Owen, it is Crawford Logan. And we covered that in my Who's Round episode, but I don't know if anybody that actually writes up the things has ever bothered to listen to those. I've read whole books on subjects that could have done with listening to some of the people that I've interviewed on Who's Round who don't list them in their sources, and you think, how much research have you bothered to do if you haven't? I'm not saying that the Blu-ray range should, by the way, but other more specialist books on, say, a particular contributor, and you go, well, I interviewed about 9 people that worked with that person. You haven't listened to my interviews with those people where I asked them about that person. That's seems anyway. The dodecahedron. Now that's going to be something. I remember the dodecahedron from watching it, and I remember the gas tax, and I remember the plant. So as I say, I think I came into this episode a bit late because I don't think I'd seen the beginning. And when I got the book, of course, the opening of the book is the Earthling being kidnapped, which we don't see in the story. And I remember being quite surprised by that it starts with the Earthling already captured. And for a story that underruns, it seems to me that we're missing a trick there. Of course, for those scenes, you'd have probably needed a location, and that was something that this production doesn't have. I love the fact that Brotadak steals the thing. I like the rather mistrusting dynamic between the Gaztax and Meglos, but also the fact that he's one step ahead of them with all of that, so that it doesn't undermine him. And in fact, yes, having the stupid, I suppose they're the secondary villains, even though they're more prominent characters than Meglos, but it means that because he's one step ahead of them, makes him slightly more potent a threat, because he's got these sort of underlings who are duplicitous and slightly comedic, who he kind of runs rings round. And therefore it enables Romana to run rings around the Gaztax without us losing all sense of danger from the story, because actually they're not the main threat. But Bill Frazer seemed to be everywhere at this point. I certainly knew who he was, and of course he's in Canine and Company as well. It was like, oh, well, somebody obviously likes him. But I didn't remember Brotadak from watching it as a kid. And then when I got the book, my favourite thing about the book was Brotadak, because he was so funny. And then I discovered later, when reading the Doctor episode guide, I went, well, let's see who played Brotadak. And I'd known Frederick Treves as an actor. He's in a thing called Brat Farrar with Mark Greenstreet, and he got credited above Mark Greenstreet, even though so it was suggested that he was actually quite a senior actor, and he popped up in all sorts, usually wearing tweed, usually as a general or a ministry man or whatever. And so when I saw that he played Brotadak, I was like, what? That is completely the last person I would have expected. And I have to say, if you've grown up watching Frederick Treves in the stuff that Frederick Treves was usually in, I watched this knowing it was when I then collected it later, and having been quite surprised that it was Frederick Treves, still was like, is that really Frederick Treves? Because he's quite unrecognisable. He's grown a few whiskers, and he seems slightly thinner faced, partially due to maybe it's because he's not wearing a 3-breasted suit or whatever. I don't know, but he really is unrecognisable as Frederick Treves, and is having a whale of a time, is definitely cast against type, and I think is absolutely delightful. And the spelling is changed in the book because, and I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, I'm sure, but Brotadak is an anagram of bad actor, because John Flanagan and Andrew McCulloch, the writers, thought that this was the sort of part that would usually be given to a bad actor. And when Freddie Treves found out, he was so delighted, he phoned his wife. And I even talk about that in one of my stand-up shows, where Meglos features quite heavily as a sort of story I think's a bit naff. It's in it for that. I just needed a sort of go-to thing that people would recognise. I've never had any particular ire towards Meglos, although when I got grown up and realised how important and scientific and lovely and elegiac and poetic and smart season 18 was, I would be a bit sniffy about Meglos, because it does have its issues of, all the virtues the other stories have, which also have their problems, but all the virtues the other stories have that make them uniquely season 18, this story does not have. But I take Fraser's point that in and of itself it's great fun. And I watched it the other day because I hadn't watched it for a while in preparation for this, and enjoyed certain aspects of it. I enjoyed certain aspects of it I'm not sure are particularly good, but that's perfectly fine because it's not being broadcast, at 5:30 on a Saturday tea time now, expecting modern audience to accept it. It's being watched as an historical artifact and something. Look at the way that Frazer's eyes act. And one of them goes quite sort of wide-eyed and bulbous, and the other one sort of squints, and they both roll, but almost in different directions. And they're wearing. And I love this theme, by the way, for the changeover, for the swap of Meglos and the Earthman. And the Earthman as a bespectacled city gent, I think, is a perfect image. That is a perfect Doctor Who image for me. Christopher Owen looks absolutely right, although there's now shades of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but Jacob Rees-Mogg is a charlatan who wears the clothes, who wears the costume of a dignified, polite Englishman, but would asset strip this country and sell its bones for a £5. Anyway, that's not the point. See, I think this is Christopher Owen speaking now, but he wasn't doing the voice when it was the plant, but it's the same treatment. But I think the choice of having... I love, part of Doctor Who's joy is that it's this sort of quaint British tradition in a way. I like the way that Christopher Owen does this alien sort of hand touching as well. And I love that very simple device of going, what does our monster look like? It looks like a person, but with a cactus skin and face. I love that. That's a great Doctor Who-y thing to do. You've got a city gent in a suit with a green spiny cactus face and hands, and I love that slightly alien way that Christopher Owen sort of touches his face there, and the bit where he transforms a little bit later where he's slightly out of shot, I think, is terrific. But I like that theme as well, and when the plant and him go backwards, and that piece of music, because of course we have one musician for this episode and then a different musician for the next 3, so that's quite interesting. But I like that. That was quite dramatic and quite exciting, and I like the fact that the gas tax initial thought is to go, well, we'll just nick this stuff and then we'll bugger off. And Meglos is like, I knew you were going to do that, so I'm locking you in, kind of thing. All of that is beautiful. I think that's quite nicely done. It speaks to the character of all of those villains who are enjoyable to be around. Tom does look so gaunt though, doesn't he, Tom Baker? The other thing was, for years, or for a short time, I pronounced it Meglos, because we watched it at the time and I talked about it to my friends at school and we called it Megalos. And even when I got the book and it was Meglos, I was like, well, do they just not pronounce the in the middle then? Because it's not Meglos. Meglos sounded wrong to me. It's easier to say when you say Megalos. And there are various... I can't think of any now, but there are various words where you'd throw in an extra syllable to make it easier to say as a kid. I'm sure I haven't made that up. But anyway, there's still a part of me that thinks that it's called Meglos. Even though I was there at the time, it's not like Crinoid and Crinoid, where I got it wrong from reading the book, and then when I watched it was corrected. I watched this go out, and I was convinced it was Megalos. The Chronicus Teresis loop... I mean, there's some real liberties taken with the timings in these stories. In this story, I mean, the main characters haven't left the TARDIS yet. I do like Romana's costume, by the way. But this, a time loop is a kind of thing as a kid that you could definitely get your head around as being a threat, and it's a Doctor Who-y thing because it's time and they're in a TARDIS, and this is, and you don't want the science fiction to be too hard or complicated. I mean, we'll talk next week about the way that they get out of this through the medium of amateur dramatics. Tom Baker has a wonderful mournful countenance when he wants to, doesn't he? I love this shooting from. I don't think Terence Dudley is the world's greatest director, but I do think it's quite a fun part of Doctor Who that Terence Dudley, who writes various weird stories a bit later on, has also directed the show, but he never does both sort of at the same time, or within the same season, because he was I get the impression he wasn't everybody's cup of tea, shall we say. But yeah, but yeah, he directs this. This is the only Doctor Who story that he directs. But I like that. I like that shot over the Earthman's shoulder, where he's doing something that we can't quite make out. It's a bit like, I mean, it's not in the same league, but it's a bit like the bit I love in Waters of Mars, where you're focusing on the foreground, and in the background somebody slightly out of focus starts shaking a bit weird, which means that they've been taken over by the water beasts of doom. And I love that because it's unnerving and it's strange and it's just in the corner of your eye. And I do kind of like that with the Earthman there, that they haven't quite focused on what he's doing, and he's doing something strange, and I still don't quite know exactly what he's doing, but it's just a bit weird and just a bit off kilter, and it means it's a little bit unsettling, and it is a very economical way of showing that something is happening, so that then when he turns around and it's the Doctor, you sort of, you retrofit that and go, oh well, that's whatever he was doing was, changing shape to us, to get us into that cliffhanger and be the plant Earthman hybrid is now looking like Doctor Who, and suddenly you go, oh, we're in a completely different story. It's going to be one of those stories where the actor playing the Doctor also gets to play the bad guy, which will have interesting consequences. But I have to choose something for episode 1 of Meglos. And I think I'll probably have to get in there early partially because I love the bit where Lex is having that conversation with Zaster, and he says something like, will you trust me to sort it out? And she, who's obviously been etched as the intransient religious fetishist intractable villain type, gives him a sort of warm smile, and and is giving an attempt to say that although she's the she's the crazy religious figure, she's not going to play it entirely on that note. And I sort of do buy that she and Zastor have a kind of friendship, which is nice, and which is because because the story doesn't really want you to side with the Dions. But you've got a classy actress there giving it a little bit of extra depth, and I particularly like the way that she goes, then where, when Dietrich's has done his, it's an artifact, it's scientific, and you go, yeah, of course it is, these silly religious people. And she just very reasonably, having had to do her religious, it is descended from the heavens, and again, that's a perfectly reasonable acting choice. It's not a kind of thing you'd probably do now, but in terms of the métier within which she is working, that kind of religious fervor thing, which again underlines what she's representing in the face of the other thing that is being represented within the very broadly drawn dynamic in the planet of Tygella, and then she brings it right down for then where, and very reasonably, and also the fact that then later on I discovered that character whom I'd remembered particularly for a moment that I will talk about in a later episode, is Jacqueline Hill from the dawn of Doctor Who. And I love that, because this didn't happen massively with shows at that time, and it seemed like sort of something really magic when it did, because if somebody had left a thing, they didn't go back to it. Or certainly that was how it seemed to me. And so many series when I was young, loads of regulars would leave at the end of one season, a whole new load of regulars would come in the next season. You didn't expect to see any of the old ones come back because actors moved on to other things. And the idea that actors would come back to a thing. Now I'm aware that things are much, much different, but it still felt in those days that an actor would have to be really doing Doctor Who a favour to sort of want to come back to it, because people moved on, whereas of course most actors are desperate for work all the time, but although there was more work about those days, but then I read in a book, I think it was in Doctor Who Celebration, that said that Jacqueline Hill came back to play Lexa in Meglos, and so suddenly I was like, oh my god, and I saw her in that when I was a kid. How lucky was I as a kid? I saw Barbara come back to Doctor Who. So not only because she's really, really good, and because we love Jacqueline Hill in this house, we love Ian and Barbara in this house. I love everything that Ian and Barbara stand for, and I love the two actors that play them. And the fact that the first Doctor Who, companion actor to come back and play a different part, and it's a sort of unique circumstance really as well, either because a former regular comes back as a guest star in a different role, which is unusual, which is totally unusual, and in fact was vetoed with a story I've just recently done, Caves of Androzani, with Michael Craze playing Krelper, which was vetoed by John Nathan Turner, and yet he's allowed this to happen, and it's wonderful that it happened, and she's so good, but it's also what it represents. It represents that Barbara has come back to Doctor Who, and not for any anniversary thing, not for any special reason, not even in some bells and whistles story, but in a strange, uncelebrated, occasionally very silly slice of Doctor Who, where there's far bigger headlines to be had around it. The story before, transforming the look of the show, and the end of the season, seeing out the longest-serving leading man in a funny little interlude with some comedy pirates and a strange jungle planet. There's a supporting role being played by a Doctor Who icon, because of course in those days we didn't really think of some of those characters as icons. Yeah, they were the old companions or whatever, but I think we can now say that Ian and Barbara are Doctor Who icons, and that there's a Doctor Who icon nestled within the humble environs of Meglos. So it's Jacqueline Hill returning to Doctor Who, but also being Lexa and the stuff that Lexa does, because she gets some lovely, lovely moments, within some, fairly uninspiringly staged scenes where, the whole dynamic of a planet is, 8 extras in a room, one in one set of costumes, one in another set of costumes, and at their head a speaking actor representing all of them, and in the middle of those two speaking actors another actor who's in a rather tired way trying to mediate between the two of them. Dear. So it's Jacqueline Hill all the way. So I haven't said. Isn't it interesting? I've skirted around saying her name, but I haven't said. And I thought that's very good. I've got away with, and because I've had complaints, but because she's broken, I haven't said Alexa for this whole thing. I've just said Lexa about 9 times, which will probably have the same effect. So if I was to score Lexa 10 out of 10, that's probably just played havoc with your equipment. What does Frazer, who, by the way, for those of you that are listening, because this comes out as a podcast, first, will it ever be a YouTube video? I don't know, if I'm honest, at this stage. And that's a shame, because Frazer has dressed as Tom Baker. So I'm about to hear from Frazer Gregory in the form of a video in which he has the hat and the scarf and has gone to great effort to make his presentation visually interesting. And so here am I, giving it to you in the audio medium. Over to Frazer. I hope he chooses Barbara Wright as Lexa. What's he going to choose as his favourite thing for part 1 of Meglos?
So it was actually really difficult to narrow down to just 5 things what I really love about Meglos. But for episode 1, what I have picked is the way that episode 1 opens. That opening TARDIS scene with the Doctor and Romana. And I'm not referring to the chronic hysteresis and the waggling of K9's tail, although that is fantastic. It is the fact that the story picks up where the Leisure Hive left off. So you have Romana in the same outfit, you have the Doctor fixing K9 after he's been into Brighton Beach, and it's that continuation of one story into the next that we haven't seen really since season 12, and before that we didn't really see after the Patrick Troughton era. And it's something that follows on in the rest of season 18. So Meglos leads into Full Circle, where there's the reference to the Earthling being dropped off at home to his wife. That then gives you the E-Space trilogy, which then goes into the Keep of Traken and Logopolis and Castrovalva trilogy. So the fact that season 12 flows like one continuous story, all coming from episode 1 of Meglos, is my first favourite thing about this.
Well, that's nice and not what I chose, but I agree. It's funny, isn't it? Because I remember being very surprised when not long after this, I saw the first William Hartnell story that I saw, which was An Unearthly Child, and was surprised to see it end by leading into the next story, and then discovered down the years that for the first few years of Doctor Who, it was an adventure in space and time and space, because one story led to the other most of the time. And then when you think that stops happening, when the individual episode titles go, you go, it becomes much more self-contained. Then, of course, it doesn't at all, because 10th Planet leads into Power, Moonbase leads into Bacra Terror, Faceless Ones leads into Evil of the Daleks, Web of Enemy of the World leads into Web of Fear, Dominators into the Mind Robot. So suddenly you're going, this thing that I think only happened in the Hartnell era and doesn't happen again happens loads, and it happens after this, doesn't it? Of course, Forty Doomsday into Kinder, Frontios into Resurrection, so it's something I think doesn't happen. And then when you watch a story or watch stories already, you go, no, it actually happens quite a lot more than I think. But I remember when I encountered it, because even when I was younger, I didn't really think that one Doctor Who story led to another. I thought there were a series of adventures. And so when they did link together, I loved it, because it felt like it was sort of knitted together as part of a greater whole that made me feel a bit more a part of it. I don't know, because there was sort of continuity. It meant me as a loyal viewer who watched all the time felt like I was on a continuing flow, which made me feel invested slightly more in it, or rewarded slightly more by it, because I got more out of it than the person who hadn't been watching last week or whatever. So I like what Frazer has alluded to there, that when it seems that one story is picking up from where another left off, you as a regular viewer enjoy that, and you're feeling you're part of a greater whole. Although, interestingly, instinctively, I remember when I got to know an older fan, and I didn't get to know many when I was younger. I remember him saying, who'd watched a lot of the old stories back in the day, he said he thought it was better when they didn't do that, because it was so unlikely that you'd go in real life from one adventure directly into another, and he preferred the idea that what we see of Doctor Who's life is just the exciting bits, and there's plenty of times where they're just putting their feet up, and that is more believable. And of course it's more believable. It's a ridiculous idea that every time you land the TARDIS, you're going to land in some dangerous situation. But then again, Doctor Who is quite a ridiculous idea. But of course, that's not an excuse to make it unbelievable. You don't go, well, nobody travels through space and time in a police box, so therefore we can do anything. Because you go, well, no, within that ridiculous premise, I still have to make it as believable as possible for the drama to work, and to anything that helps the viewer get on board and go, okay, I've got to put that ridiculousness aside and still believe in this. So it's on the one hand, I sort of like it both ways in a way, because on the one hand, I do think it's a bit unbelievable if every story leads on to the next story. But on the other hand, I do really like it when one story relates to another or leads into another, particularly in the classic era for some reason. I don't know why that is. I like it. I think because current Doctor Who has story arcs across the whole season, I think I strive a little bit more for individual episodes to be a little bit more individualistic, because you want to watch a standalone, and you don't want to have to have the idea of, oh well, this only makes sense if you've watched episode 1 and episode 13. That gets a little bit, that then I've got my eye on the general viewer, and I'm worried about them being alienated. But also sometimes I just want to watch a slice of Doctor Who that stands alone. Whereas of course pretty much all Doctor Who adventures from classic Who stand alone, although some of them have references, and as we know, there's that argument that John Nathan Turner made the whole thing too referential to the show's past or whatever. So I sort of have my cake and eat it with it. I totally buy what Frazer has said, and I do like that, and it makes me, as a feeling, as something that I can't really quantify, sort of comforted when, oh yeah, that's referred to that thing that I know about. But equally, I'm also very happy when it's just a series of, oh no, you've dropped in on, over a 2-year period, well, not that, but it's been a couple of weeks since the last adventure. They've been to a couple of planets, and now, but this is the dangerous one. So yeah, I like that because it does also show, interestingly, when I was talking about the nuances of the arguments between science and religion, and I have sympathy with both sets of arguments and both sets of arguers. It's possible to not be religious, but to see the importance of religion and almost in a way admire people who follow a moral code, and also be horrified by people that follow the same set of instructions and do it to do horrendous things, of course. And of course, I equally admire people that my personal sympathies lie more with going, well, no, I'm responsible for everything that I do, and any moral code I have to account for without saying, well, this is written down over here that it's okay or not okay if I do this. I've got nobody to blame but myself. But I also get quite tired of sort of smug atheism, if you like. So there's nuance everywhere. That machine that isn't a lecturer has just made a noise at me, which really worries me. God, that's the other thing about modern technology. It makes noises and it does things. The speaker that is nearly got Jacqueline Hill's name in Meglos, one of the reasons we've had problems, she's not been pairing with the Fire Stick, and I think it's just that our speaker, who cannot be named, is quite an old one, and we updated our Fire Stick and it's just not playing sound. And I've tried everything, and sometimes it does, and if I restart everything, sometimes it doesn't. But this is getting really irritating. So anyway, we've paired it with the. But yes, a couple of days ago, because we've got these lights as well that we haven't programmed the switches, but they're for disabled people because my partner can't really flick switches, but she can touch pad, and we've got these things that need to be properly programmed. And we ran out of money. But they can dim or turn off or go up or whatever. And anyway, she was in the bedroom the other day and the lights just went on of their own accord. She called me up and said, have you just pressed anything? I was downstairs. I was like, no. She said, the lights have just come on. I wasn't touching anything. And then the following morning, we woke up to the speaker with Jacqueline Hill's name from Meglos nearly, talking downstairs. Now, I don't quite know what she said, but she said something and we weren't there. And we weren't talking to her. So, but now this new speaker thing, which makes a noise a bit like a sort of a bongo drum, has just done its bongo drum nose. I think because I wasn't playing anything through them, so they've gone, we're bored now, we're turning off. I didn't ask you to, and if you've made that decision for yourself, what other decisions will you start to make, speaker? Will you soon decide that you don't actually need humanity anymore? Whoa. Anyway, that's not the theme of Meglos, so we can't really go any further with those thoughts. It's a funny old thing, Meglos. I don't, hand on heart, I don't think it's particularly good, but will I be entertained watching it? Yes. Is it a story I will pick to watch for fun in the future? Yes. Are there better stories I will watch less frequently than Meglos? For sure, because there are some stories that I think are very well made and are very smart and intelligent and good quality that don't while away a Sunday afternoon in quite the same way that Meglos might. Does it get some things wrong? Oh boy, does it. Yeah. Are some bits of it actively bad? Yeah, probably. And yet I forgive it for all of that, because I think some of its bad things, like the depiction of the society on Tigella, which is very simplistic, does have a kind of naive charm about it, and you've got to kind of admire the ambition of going, well, I've got to present these big ideas, and I've got 3 speaking actors with which to do it, so this is how I'm going to do it. And then the costume people go, we've got a load of wigs. Well, that'd be the makeup people, wouldn't it? They go, if we give all of one of them these wigs, that'll help sell it, won't it? So then the actors turn up and go, I've thought about my character, and I think it would be excellent if Diedrich said, what's that? That's my hair. What everybody who has who believes in science grows his... Where does that come from then? Is it that you start tinkering with a calculator and suddenly your hair grows blonde as a result? Or is it that you show an aptitude for... you recalibrate an engine, and so they shave your head off and plonk a wig for mathematical excellence on your head. How does that work? I've no idea. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's an enjoyable, slightly childish, slightly silly, at times misjudged, but at times very nicely judged, interesting effort. And yes, somewhat but it's very much its own thing. I suppose you could say it is unique in season 18 in terms of its tone and its ambition, and anything that... I'm always a bit fond of anything that goes against the grain, even though the grain of season 18 is one I rather like. But as I say, at the time I wouldn't have said that Meglos was any different to some of the other stories, and actually it was much easier to follow and much more in the image of what I, as a whatever I was, 6 or 7 year old, thought of Doctor Who as, which was bad guys threatening the Doctor, scary lethal plants in tendrily jungles, and space battles and laser guns and all of that, rather than elegant music and crushed velvet and lots of thoughtful chat about maths and stuff. So thanks, Frazer. But as I say, I love that stuff now, so we always come to revisit stuff as well, and rethink and reframe the way that we see the world. And by the world, I mean certain Doctor Who stories. Well, it is. I suppose it is a bit like a religion to me, Doctor Who. It is descended from the heavens, or BBC Television Centre. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Meglos, as introduced and eulogised by Frazer Gregory. So, I'm old enough to remember October 1980. I had no idea this was a story that was destined to be seen as a stylistic hangover from season 17, and not, in keeping with the elegant mathematics and scientific rigour of the new regime, scripturally under Christopher H. Bidmead, and aesthetically and in overall charge of John Nathan Turner, who himself would obviously go to take the show to a place where it was maligned for its silliness, but when he or its over-reliance in continuity, or whatever it is that you think is wrong with the John Nathan Turner era. And there are lots of people who have lots of differing opinions, and some who think that opinion is wrong, and that Doctor Who wouldn't have survived as long without him. I mean, I think there's a truth in little bits of everybody's views, but certainly he was the Renaissance man this period of the show's history, and the Leisure Hive had brought Doctor Who dazzling into the 1980s with its Starscape and its neon logo and its Lovett Bickford with his single camera work and the music by the Radiophonic Workshop, and a very sensible and rigorous approach to the scientific aspects of what Doctor Who could do. And then one story later, we have a planet with talking plants, invaded by pirates led by a bloke from the Army game, and people in wigs arguing with people with hats about religion versus science, all whilst Doctor Who and his companion don't even leave the TARDIS for the first instalment, and we are about to find them going through a loop in time, a chronic hysteresis, which they will... Well, we'll see how they'll get out of it. So let's see how Frazer Gregory defends Meglos, as he has every right to do. And we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Well, one of the lovely things about not doing these all in one go, as I haven't with this particular set of happy times and places is that I've had a bit of feedback from the people who inhabit the rarefied atmosphere of my Patreon, and a couple of interesting things have happened. One of which is that apparently Crawford Logan is credited as the voice of Meglos in the Blu-ray. I've not read the production notes on the Blu-ray. So somebody has either found that out or, heaven forbid, they might have listened to my interview with him. Who knows? So now we have... And the other thing is actually a bit of rigorous science, which I will quote shortly. But it's about the dodecahedron, which is rather fun. Now then, how do we feel? I mean, I love Christopher H. Bidmead's rather sort of lofty proclamations about the rigorous nature of the scientific ideas he brought to Doctor Who, and here we have a time loop that is defeated by the scientific method of giving the incorrect cue. Or, I listened to a podcast recently, might have been Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, I think, which is just by coincidence recently talked about Meglos, and they say they basically beat it through amateur dramatics, which is a very fair point. She actually does a gulp there, doesn't she, Romana? Lalla Ward actually does a thing that I'm not sure people do that in real life. We sort of gulp as a shorthand for a yikes in comic books or descriptions or something, but I'm not sure. But I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody in real life actually go, "Oh crikey!" But she does that there, doesn't she? She does a gulp. I love the look on Frederick Treves' face. I mean, if in doubt, have a good time. And good actors can do it, and bad actors can't. And actually, the history of Doctor Who is sometimes littered with people deciding to have a laugh who don't actually have what it takes. Fortunately, Treves is an exquisite and very decent actor. So, he has the technique and the ability to sort of underline, to give ballast to the sort of silliness that he is indulging in. So it works. It's fine, and it's actually a joy. It's a joy to watch, especially if you know him from other things. As I say, I think he's barely recognisable, and Frazer can do that kind of eye-rolling, rumbling, dryly sort of pessimistic comedy in his sleep. Yeah, as I say, it's a bitchy. This episode is 21 minutes long, and a good portion of that 21 minutes is the Doctor and Romana doing the same thing. That's a reasonable shot. I mean, the spaceship wobbles a bit, doesn't it, as it goes up? But actually, it wobbles quite a lot. But it's a brave. So you can sort of see that somebody's got a hand out shot or a stick, and they're sort of waggling it. Why does that person get a? Why does that extra at the back get suddenly a bit of attention? Anyway, that's Bruce Callender, who's the gentleman of colour next to Frederick Treves there, who was he's also a Mavellan, I think. He's no longer with us, but nice to see. It's a sadly rare thing to see any actors of colour in Doctor Who. During this period, and of course it's rather a shame that it has to be a non-speaking uncredited performer, but it shows that attempts are being made to redress the balance, however inadequate they might seem. Now, that was actually a lovely shot, that low angle, and you saw Jacqueline Hill's shadow first, actually rather nicely lit. She's a very striking woman, isn't she? And that's a great costume, the pink and the black. Zasta's just woken up, and he's oh, poor old Edward Underdown. So the Deons worship the dodecahedron, and the lovely Lisa and Troby and Lisa, who are patrons at patreon.com/Toby Haydock and all of that malarkey. They having listened to episode 1 of Meglos on Happy Times and Places, they have sent me, they're round the archives on Twitter, by the way, and they do a brilliant podcast, which I've just remembered I've agreed to do. That's actually a decent shot because it's a mixture of perspective and of a bit of model, and yeah, that was all right. The the ship landing far away in quite a small set. I think they're quite stuck for space here. So actually, that was quite inventive. I'm not sure what I make of Tom Baker's performance of Meglos. I mean, the one key thing is that nobody's talk to each other because Meglos, the plant, is quite sort of cheeky and, well, he's very straightforward and, he sort of banters and outwits. He's got a witty presence in his villainy, and then Christopher Owen is quite nicely sort of alien and savouring his sort of shape changing, and then Tom Baker has gone to sort of gone for sort of coldly psychotic. So nobody's discussed what Meglos is like, so that the three performers actually tie in their interpretations with each other. I like Colette Gleeson. She was a a regular in Just Good Friends, the Jan Francis Paul Nicholas sitcom. And I don't know why, but there's something about what she does in this that I find sort of very attractive as a performance. I think she's got something. And bless her, she's maintained her dignity whilst wearing that wig. Tom Baker's doing villainous acting there. I'll tell you about Simon Sutton, the Sentry. And I know that he's in later episodes. He's in all 4 episodes because, did I say this last time? This is the problem with not doing it all in the same night, is that Meglos is the only Doctor Who story that doesn't just consist of the regulars. So that let's take Edge of Destruction out of the equation, or we could say Edge of Destruction and Meglos are the only Doctor Who stories of the classic era, because obviously a Doctor Who story is a self-contained episode in the modern era, that has exactly the same cast credits for all of its episodes. Now, it might be worth looking at the crew credits, but I think because it's mid-season, it won't top and tail it with some of the things that you might have mid-season. If the crew are all the same, which I suspect they probably are, then we can extend it to not just cast but crew credits, that it has exactly the same set of credits on all 4 episodes. So, of course, when they released it on Blu-ray, they screwed up the opening credits by spelling Andrew McCulloch's name wrong. But let's not get into that. This is the story that was the easiest to do. Ha ha ha. Anyway, I Swear Allegiance to Ty is a very Tom Baker thing to do. And he sort of done it, doesn't he? He flicks between playing scary Meglos and being Tom Baker larking about, which is essentially what his Doctor is at the moment. But I Swear Allegiance to Ty. You can absolutely imagine him. The line is probably like, "You want me to swear allegiance to Ty?" And he's gone in rehearsal, "Wouldn't it be witty if I said I swear allegiance to Ty, because that's funny," and do it like that. But unfortunately for him, he's also doing it as the scary cold character that he's playing. So it's this weird sort of melange to Tom Baker's performance in this story, I think. I mean, he's fascinating, whatever he does. You could listen to him read the phone book, and he's got an enormous presence. But he's quite ill-disciplined and now, not always, because sometimes an anarchic sort of unpredictable presence as a performer can be electrifying on film and television. But also, says the Square, sometimes a little bit of discipline is actually very important when it comes to being part of a company telling a story. I mean, I'm sorry, Christopher H. Bidmead. I mean, I'm sure he would say, well, it was the fault of the writers and we didn't have time to sort it out. But I mean, this is amongst the stupidest things in the whole of Doctor Who. But I also know, as an actor what fun it is to do bad acting. So you can see why everybody goes, "Oh, let's just do this. It's quite fun." I don't really remember this aspect of the story at the time. I was always kind of wanting them to get the hell out of the TARDIS anyway. So for me, this was probably a relief, because I want them to get to the new part of the story. That's all quite indulgent, isn't it? But it's okay. And so we've had that lower shot, and now we've got a higher shot, and the camera coming down. So that and then Diedrichs and Karras sort of almost, bookending the frame as that comes down. That's not a bad attempt at an attractive and interesting visual, and the levels are all good there. Tom's up on a plinth, isn't he? So he's a bit higher than everybody. Anyway, centuries ago in this podcast, I was going to talk about Lisa and Troby, who have sent me a couple of clips that are to do with Meglos. One is of Carl Sagan, the famous Carl Sagan, who's and it's I wish we had programs. It's just a clever man walking around and not always even looking at camera and saying stuff about, in this case, maths. And he talks about the dodecahedron. It hasn't come from nowhere. So and excuse me if you already know this, but this was I'm no mathematician. But Sagan was saying that the Pythagoreans, who were the maths guys, were unsure of that they had various shapes. There were 5 shapes that stood for different and important things, and the cube was something to do with its 4 sides, were to do with elements and all of that sort of stuff. But the dodecahedron was a sort of, it was a secret. And the general public weren't to know of it, because I love that phrase. It caused in the Pythagoreans a crisis in doctrine, because it's something to do with the square root of 2 could not be expressed as a ratio of 2 numbers, no matter how big, and that caused this crisis in doctrine, because for the Pythagoreans, you should be able to express any number through a ratio. And that's what irrational means originally in mathematics. And here is the dodecahedron, so I'm being relevant. And I love that glowing, bright light. That suggests real power. And it's a very small set, and it's just one camera angle. But the camera's moving now. But that's impressive. I think that's great. And that's a really sort of Doctor Who-y thing. But I love that lighting. But yeah, here we have the dodecahedron, which isn't really... Tom's doing his raising his eyes to his skull thing that he does at the end of Armageddon Factor. You see him doing that pissed at parties and going, "I've got a thing I can do now, so I can bring it into my sci-fi." So here he's got a thing. So he's with the dodecahedron, which, but it's not just about maths. It's about the meaning of irrational, because irrational literally meant, unable to be expressed through a ratio, but for the Pythagoreans it then came to mean threatening, because their world no longer made sense. That's how we get our meaning of the word irrational, to mean against, dangerously against sensible thought, because it threatened their mathematical outlook. And so the dodecahedron, which is made up of its faces, are they're pentagon. Not pentagons, aren't they? They're 5-sided, so they're the 5-sided shapes. 12 of those make up a dodecahedron, and there's something to do with the maths of that the Pythagoreans didn't like. So they hid it, and it was dangerous. They didn't trust the dodecahedron. So that's probably that's Bidmead there going, well, never mind the breaking a time loop through the medium of terrible acting, deliberate terrible acting from the Doctor and Romana. That there's the dodecahedron is inspired by the reality of the Pythagorean outlook towards that particular shape, and it's the consequences it had for. I love this piece of music. I do like the sort of cactus rattle of the theme that Meglos has, which was one of the nicer bits of music on Doctor Who the Music, the LP I had that opened with the the android's indigestion roar of the Sea Devils suite, and then the clattering, whatever the hell it is, of Roger Lim's Arc of Infinity. It was the Meglos, but at least had a kind of sort of tune to it. Simon Sutton, who is the guard. He's now, I think, he's literary editor of the Sunday Times or something. He's something literary. I'll look it up properly. This guard here. I had made a note of this in my head last week, and I've forgotten now because I've been looking at dodecahedron stuff. So that's a nice. It's actually quite nice that Karis and Lexa get their moment together. You know, the two factions united in the face of dodecahedron shrinking. I like Romana's red costume actually, and this jungle seemed like a thing at the time. That the bell plants. This was the sort of stuff as kids that we were the headlines, the things we were well into, even though they're just a sort of incidental threat. The bell plants were, a selling point of this particular story. But yes, I like the fact that the two factions have to get together in order to be terrified of the. I mean, never mind a dodecahedron. There was a straight line of actors. So the power is gone. The other clip that Lisa and Troby sent me was of Barry Took, the presenter of Points of View. Points of View was a programme, a typical BBC, where people wrote in to say what they liked and hated about television. And they'd quite often showcase things that people hated about television, which, because the BBC has always been very good. This is the piece of music, and then this tune, which is a whole tune. And I remember then when I got these episodes to watch, I realised that that whole piece of music is in this sequence. This is a whole sequence. So now watching it with the pictures, I'm sort of transported to my bedroom where I'd listen to this theme on the vinyl recording, but go, oh no, it's a whole section of music that covers it. It's not broken up like some bits of music that you would get on soundtrack records or CDs. This whole bit is whole in its thing. And of course Tom Baker as Meglos was an image because there was a waxwork in Madame Two Swords, not only of Tom Baker, famously used for the Five Doctors, but I'm sure when I went to Madame Two Swords, I've only been once, I'm sure Tom Baker's Doctor was there, but also was he there as Meglos as well? Did they do two? Which seems lovely publicity for Meglos. Not many people get Madame Two Swords made of them. World leaders, famous astronauts, sports people, figures of history, Doctor Who, yeah, and Meglos. I mean, that's he's not in the. It's only because he looks a bit like Doctor Who, and I love the way that that piece of music ends with when the doctor enters, you get a little bit of doom doom doo doo doo. It's you get a bit of the Doctor Who theme. I always like it when the incidental music does a little bit of a it's Doctor Who, and I think they weren't allowed to do that at some points or after a while. I'm sure, was it in John Nathan Turner's memoirs, or maybe is it the modern series where you're not allowed to echo the theme tune now, or at some point in the history of the show with the incidental music. But that's definitely not always been a rule, because you did it there. There's a bit, isn't there, in Greatest Show in the Galaxy when they go off from the stalls, lady, is it? And you get a little bit of the theme in it. She's no nonsense, is Lexa. And I love the fact that she's got her hair hanging out the back. So yes, Barry Took had a letter on Points of View, and I'm saying this at a time when the BBC is full of stories, self-flagellating stories of complaints against it for its behaviour towards one of its presenters. We'll get my opinion out of that out of the way very quickly. If a BBC presenter presenting a sports programme in the presenting of that sports expresses a political opinion, I think the viewers are fair enough to say, I've watched a sports programme, I don't want the presenter to infect that with their opinion. On his social media, I think he's allowed to say whatever he likes because it's not on the BBC. It seems to me fairly straightforward. Or otherwise, where do you draw the line? I was at a dinner party with Gary Lineker, and he expressed his opinion. But he's paid by the BBC. He's no right to express an opinion. Well, yeah, as long as he's not doing it on the BBC during the course of a BBC programme. So, but let's not get into that. And there's me. I occasionally work on the BBC, and I've just expressed an opinion. Frederick Treves does. I mean, he's sort of taking the mickey with that going up a couple of octaves in the issue of his climactic threat, but it kind of works. And Lalla Ward is always, even though I think she can be a bit glib sometimes, she's very good at that looking in terror at the cliffhanger stuff. She doesn't undersell any of that stuff. But yes, so on points of view, Barry read out a letter saying that he shouldn't be presenting points of view anymore, and that this list of people thought that Meglos should be doing it instead. And it's a big list, and he only quotes from a few of them, but it's people like Idi Amin and Barry Took, and it's well known of famous people. So it's a spoof letter, but basically suggesting that Barry Took, much loved presenter of Points of View, should be replaced by Meglos. And Barry said he doesn't know who the hell Meglos is. And in those days, I suspect you could present that programme and nobody would actually bother to check. You just do that as a gag. But I don't know. So Meglos has had two. I've had two little raidings of the archives, thanks to Round the Archives. They're Round the Archives. They've been raiding them, and they very kindly sent me, a clip of Carl Sagan being amazing. And I thought I understood it, and then I started to try and explain it to you, and got a bit lost. I get the stuff about 2 as a rational number, but I think I got lost as to how that led to the dodecahedron. But anyway, it's online. I think you should Google, I don't know, Carl Sagan dodecahedron, something like that. It's on YouTube as Cosmos, the Platonic Solids, and it's fascinating. And Carl Sagan being, that kind of rangy genius that he was. And the points of view, yes, was Barry Took being very funny, and Meglos, that you didn't see that on the season 18 Blu-ray. So there's something that wasn't on the season 18 Blu-ray. So thanks to Lisa and Troby for that. Now, in all of the excitement, I have forgotten to get to Frazer Gregory. So let's get to Frazer. He's the guest, not Lisa and Troby. Lisa and Troby will be guests on a future Happy Times and Places, and very welcome they will be, because they are lovely and fascinating people. So Frazer Gregory's favourite thing about Meglos 2, after I have said my favourite thing about Meglos 2, which it's got to be that piece of music. And of course, Meglos is interesting because it has a different musician for parts. So the crew, I think you'll find, won't be the same on all 4 episodes, because we changed the incidental musician, of course, because Peter Howell and Paddy Kingsland shared duties due to illness. So so all of the credits are not the same, but the cast list is exactly the same on all the episodes of Meglos, and the only other story that has identical cast list for its whole duration is Edge of Destruction, which sort of doesn't count because it's just the regulars. Okay, so my favourite thing is that piece of music, particularly the sort of rattlesnake, spiky cactus, goosebumps going up your arm. It's whatever that thing is. It's not a gyro, but it's something, whatever that sort of slightly raspy percussion sound that's just prickly, the prickly incidental music sound, but then into that actually very lovely piece of music that covers what is essentially Tom Baker wandering about, either with spikes on or without. So that's my favourite bit of Meglos 2. It brings back happy memories of funking in my bedroom to Doctor Who the music. Frazer, what is he going to say is his favourite thing about episode 2 of Meglos, and will we agree?
Hi again, everybody. So for episode 2, I have picked one of the acting performances from Meglos. No, it's not Frederick Killer Treves or Bill Kick K9 Fraser, but it is the man himself, Thomas Stewart Baker. Dual role, Meglos and the Doctor really gives Tom Baker the opportunity to shine in this story. Again, a lot of the criticism that comes to season 18 is about Tom's performance, that he is dialing it in a little bit, he's not really bothered. And to be honest, I think that's a little bit of claptrap. Certainly in season 18, he's more subdued, he's less of a clown than what he was in season 17, but that's a conscious effort on the part of the production team to move away from that side of his character, and it really gives him again the opportunity to shine and show that he is a really good actor. It takes him back to his season 12 heyday when he was fresh into the role and he had a lot to prove. To go out this way in this style is a really great opportunity for him. And with Meglos, he does play both roles really well. He still has that fun, clownish side to the Doctor when he's tripping up in the TARDIS console room, but he also brings that intensity and that egotistical megalomaniac side to Meglos that just makes it a fantastically compelling performance for both characters.
Oh, interesting, because I was not wild about Tom there, was I? And it's partially because he, as I say, I think it's to do with discipline. I think when he does that sort of cold, hard stare, he could stop you at 1,000 paces, and he definitely is a man of extreme power and menace when he wants to be. I mean, and as an actor, he has that real sense of danger, and there's a stillness to him when he wants, which, considering he's so flamboyant and toothy, shows that he's actually more than just the personality actor. I think he's sometimes consigned to being in the discourse that we have about doctors and doctor actors. He's not. He's a classical actor of some heft, and he has great presence. But I do think he is ill-disciplined, and I actually like his season 18 performance. I like the sort of slightly maudlin, brooding, because he's still really funny in season 18. He's still extremely witty, and has some great lines. I'm with Frazer. I don't buy that he's just maudlin, but there is a low keyness that is a conscious decision to rein back some of the excesses of season 17, which I do think kind of needed doing, and especially with a new style of production, it needs somebody to be a bit less, winking through the fourth wall or whatever. But I do think Tom Baker is a very, very good actor, but I'm not sure I'm with Frazer that it's at its best with the characterization of Meglos, for the reasons I outlined about lack of consistency with the different people playing it, but also I think there's a lack of consistency within Tom as Meglos. Sometimes and yes, I know he's having to pretend to be Doctor Who to pull the wool over the eyes of the Tygellans, but he sort of sometimes does that, and he sometimes doesn't. Though now I'm talking myself out of because when he's in that control room and he is a bit sort of Tom Bakery, but it's because I don't entirely trust Tom Baker, because I've seen him misbehave before. But then again, a performer that doesn't quite make you feel comfortable and makes you go, is he taking the make? That's very interesting. I think it's because I mistrust self-indulgence. I don't like it as from actors, and I don't like it from comedians, especially when it's a sort of team game. So I've always said, it's easy to get a laugh. It's harder to get the right kind of laugh. And if you're on stage with 4 other people and you get your cock out, you're going to get a laugh. Okay. Let's not go any further. But you know what I mean. You could get up, but it's unfair on your fellow performers if they're trying to time some lines or a bit of business that you've meticulously worked out. It's easy to get a sort of It's easy to spoil the context and get a sort of visceral, or instinctive response from an audience or from a viewer. I think it's harder to do it and stop the house of cards from falling down. Do you know what I mean? When you're being funny within something like Doctor Who, you have to do it in a way that doesn't wreck Doctor Who, which is a which is on very flimsy ground. It's almost daring you to not take it seriously or to dismiss it by its very nature and by its very premise. So it needs sort of somebody responsible at its core. And of course, Tom Baker is probably my favourite Doctor. He has a he and Patrick Troughton will have to slug it out. But probably what puts Tom, fighting with Troughton rather than beating him is his occasional waywardness, which I know is part of his appeal as a performer, because Brian Croucher calls him a creative terrorist, which is a great phrase, and he'll sort of throw a bomb into a scene and keep everyone on their toes. Nobody's phoning it in then, but I think it can also be a little bit selfish, dare I say it. There, I've said it. And that's me, talking about a man that I love, who was my introduction to Doctor Who and was my doctor, I've been lucky enough to encounter as well and had good times with. Although I've occasionally sensed that slightly sort of bullish, slightly difficult side to him, where you go, oh, you're kind of, you're throwing your weight around a little bit. I think there is an element of that, and sometimes that can be in daring you with a sort of performance thing. You can almost see he might be daring the director to go, I'm going to do this now, and I dare you to cross me on it. But maybe that's just because we know so much about him now that, and we've got some of that studio footage from other stories where he sort of, he's a bit hard work. How do you know how I'd react to you? Are you an alien from the constellation of Kasterborous? So I think there is a sort of, there is a, he's almost spits through his teeth, doesn't he? A kind of cussed kind of insolence that he has, which again makes him sort of compelling. But I think it is at his best is when he's got somebody like Philip Hinchcliffe, who he respected. Different time in his career as the Doctor, of course. All talent, I think, benefits from being deployed well, occasionally being filtered, occasionally being controlled. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe sometimes it does, maybe sometimes it doesn't. It depends who's doing the controlling. That's why brilliance and magic is dependent on so many different things. That's why so many really talented people can get together to make something and it not work. And sometimes people who've only produced average stuff get together and on the right day produce something amazing. It's there is an alchemy about this stuff, which is why it benefits from endless revisiting. And as I've been talking out loud, I was starting to sort of go, well, yeah, I think Tom's a bit wayward at this as Meglos. And as I was talking, I was sort of almost talking myself out of it and going, no, you've got Tom Baker, you've got this mercurial genius who's a very gifted classical actor. You don't want somebody telling him what to do. You just let him do what he wants to do, because he's so watchable and he's so unpredictable and he's so amazing, and he's more value than somebody just playing by the rules. So I'm Frazer and I came, I think with very different opinions there, and the truth is probably in both of them, and that's fine. But and of course I'm supposed to be accentuating the positive, but because I was just giving an alternative point of view there, but in so doing maybe brought myself round to Frazer's point of view, which was certainly not my own going into this episode. So happy to concede that one to Frazer. Am I right or am I wrong? I mean, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but he's certainly, Thomas Stuart Baker is certainly a fascinating performer, a great asset to Doctor Who. I think he's great in season 18. Season 18 I watched as a kid, and there was no question that Doctor Who was amazing and that Tom Baker was an amazing Doctor Who. And we know so much now, and he is a contrary and complicated and often contradictory figure is Tom Baker, but he's magic, isn't he? He is essentially, he is magic. Tom, never mind the Stuart. Stuart is Gallifreyan for magic. Tom Magic Baker. I salute you. Even though, as we see in Meglos, he can sometimes be a little prickly. Hello, everybody. It's part 3 of Meglos. The Doctor is in a sticky situation, but that's because of all the aloe vera coursing through his veins now that he is a cactusy plant called Meglos, a Zulfathurin, who has seemingly stolen a dodecahedron from the savants and the Dions who inhabit the vegetable-ridden planet of Tigella. And if that's not Doctor Who in a crazy nutshell, it is a very nutty premise, appropriate for Doctor Who's nutshell in season 18 of Doctor Who, which is being celebrated by Frazer Gregory. It's his favourite story of season 18. He says it is probably nobody else's favourite story of season 18. Don't write it if it's yours. But I'm glad that everything is somebody's favourite something. And I don't have any of the dislike for Meglos that often abounds. I mean, I used it as a shorthand for bad Doctor Who in my second Doctor Who show. My stepson stole my sonic screwdriver, but that was partially due to circumstance and storytelling. My stepson took a bit of a liking to it, so he did put it on kind of repeat when I was recuperating from a very, very unpleasant outbreak of psoriasis. And I came back from hospital and was sort of covered in unguents and in too much pain to move. So I was pretty much sort of on the sofa in a dressing gown, falling asleep, waking up, and kind of not moving very much. And when Ethan came home from school, he would grab whichever DVD he was in the mood to watch over and over and over and over again, and it happened to be Meglos. So I kind of reverse engineered it into the show so that when that moment came at the end of the show, it was a kind of comic. It was a kind of. I was able to do so with a certain sort of comedic ruefulness, so that it was a sort of bittersweet, happy kind of ending. I mean, I don't, It probably is my least favourite of well, I'd probably say it's the one I think is probably of the lowest quality, but that doesn't mean, but that's a conundrum, isn't it? Because there are stories that I admire for their craft and think are well written and well directed and elegantly done, that I might think that I might watch less than I might watch Meglos, which I think is great fun, although it's not a story I watch an awful lot. But certainly when I watched it this time around in preparation for this, I don't always watch stories in preparation for this. I just, I know everything well enough. I think I've watched everything dozens of times, I'm afraid. But actually, I thought, no, because I haven't watched it for a while, I will watch it for pleasure first, so I don't lose an opportunity to watch it for pleasure by watching it for, in inverted commas, work. And it's thoroughly entertaining. I think its problems come from the fact that it's not. It's perhaps not consistent. It doesn't quite cohere like perhaps the rest of season 18, and perhaps that's what its issue is. Whereas everything else is sort of uniform to the season and within itself. But uniform is not necessarily Doctor Who's strength anyway. And I think, I maybe think Keeper of Traken is a better production, and it's certainly more sumptuous looking, and it has a certain elegance in its dialogue and certainly its its costuming and design. But I think I'd probably rather watch Meglos, even though I think Keeper of Traken is, if there can be such a thing, better. So that's the beauty of Doctor Who. But I'm not going to call it a guilty pleasure. I perhaps do, because why would you feel guilty about anything that you enjoy? It just goes to show that when it comes to entertainment, what is good, because I'm afraid, and we sometimes lose sight of this, we aficionados of old television, if something gets loads of viewers and loads of people talking about it, even if we think it's awful, because it's popular, being popular is not as easy as it looks. Otherwise, we'd all be making popular television programs. Now, obviously, I would prefer it if we made higher-minded stuff popular. But then again, I'm saying that as somebody that's about to watch for the 30th time a children's television sci-fi series in which an intergalactic cactus disguises itself as a slightly wayward and occasionally bored actor amidst some very small jungle sets and some leftover costumes thrown over some character actors who are trying their best to mess about in a containable way in a story about cactus versus maths. So high mind your way out of that one, Toby. So I'm going to watch from the beginning. It's episode 3 of Meglos, and I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we are. The Starfield is only 7 episodes in, and it still feels, because it's one. The Tom Baker in the Starfield is not a title sequence I'm hugely used to these days, because I don't watch season 18 an awful lot, and because it was new to me. It's funny. I've been listening to a podcast today where they were talking about the 80s, happens to be the blunt pen knife, and sort of getting nostalgic about the neon logo. But to me, it's new. It's new and newfangled. And I understand John Nathan's desire to drag Doctor Who into the 1980s. But of course, anything you do to try and make something new, in not much time, it sort of dates itself, which is why I feel the pre-Starfield titles, because they're not looking, they don't seem to me to be trying to be 70s or 60s. They seem to me to be trying to suggest space and time, which is obviously not tied to a particular decade. So they do seem a bit more timeless than what you get post John Nathan Turner. But John Nathan Turner was trying to reinvent Doctor Who along more serious and more uniform lines, which are all perfectly reasonable things to want to be doing. This jungle set's actually not too bad, and when it's shot up close, it looks okay. I mean, I'm sure to modern eyes, they don't see through any of the sort of studio lighting, and any idea that this is even vaguely outside would be laughable to a modern audience. But I was brought up in this sort of thing. I would see jungle, and it is a decent jungle, but the lighting, it's the hue of VT can't convince you that you're outside. There's something in the air that when you're outside that VT would pick up that isn't in the air in a sort of sterile interior studio environment. These and little things like a breeze, slightly dappled, moving, natural light. But this is what I was brought up on, and it's fine. And I was brought up on planets being represented by 2 or 3 spokespeople, and I think they do. Crawford Logan's a lovely chap. He was in The Woman in Black, which, as I record this, is about to close at the West End after years and years and years, and all sorts of Doctor Who people starring in it. Murray Watson, John Nettleton, I think, opened it. Brian Miller was in it for years and years, and currently it's Julian Forsyth, who's not been in Doctor Who, but he was a great friend of Bernard Kay's. He spoke at Bernard Kay's funeral, so Julian is closing it, I think, before it goes on tour. But I know Richard Franklin was understudying it at one point, as was a guy called Anthony Werner, who used to go out with Deborah Watling, but was also he's an ice soldier in Keys of Marinus. But he'd left the company by the time that I was interviewing Crawford. So unfortunately, I missed Anthony Werner, who would have added to my roster of Keys of Marinus people. Nice, yes. That's the repeated bit of business here, which is quite strange because it kind of makes the extras into extras. They're reacting to them like they're being obstructive, but they can't actually say anything to them because they're non-speaking artistes. So again, it's slightly theatrical, but I find all of that stuff quite comforting. They are quite an eclectic bunch. They're a sort of multi-ethnic bunch. The Gaztacs. Now, of course, again, you say now, it's typical that a rare attempt to show multiple ethnicities is when you've got a ragtag bunch of pirates. But nonetheless, anything that changes the sort of physiognomical landscape of television at this time is to be applauded, even if in execution we go, yeah, but wouldn't it have been nicer if, say, all the rational scientists on Tygella had been, people of, multi-ethnic or whatever. But anyway, it's if nothing else, giving those actors work and a bit of representation, those supporting artists work and a bit of representation. It's a small thing, but it's worth commenting on because it's not hugely common at the moment. So this is Tom being Doctor Who. Now, actually, this is quite funny, the whole planet rotation thing. I mean, it's funny that Nathan Turner wanted to get rid of sort of university humour, as they called it, of season 17. I like Romana and I like Lalla Ward. I think she's very witty and funny and obviously very intelligent. But I think that I can understand why people might not warm to that sort of that air of sort of prep school self-satisfaction that Romana 2 exudes. Oh, that's great. Again, I love that. But Tom as Meglos looks magnificent. And I remember this as a kid, this idea of the Earthman trying, the plucky, bank manager trying, and succeeding on occasion in undermining the sort of cruel galactic plant beast, is to me a very Doctor Who thing. It's a very Doctor Who thing that a sort of very ordinary, British-looking bloke. It's not the biggest part. He doesn't do an awful lot, but he has those moments, and they're amongst the moments I remember from watching it first time. And nowadays Doctor Who celebrates our plucky humanity. It's kind of part of the selling point of the show because we're a little bit more. I do actually think in this early part of the 21st century, having worried about being downtrodden and being hard on ourselves, we are now a little bit more self-congratulatory. So there's and that's not Doctor Who. There's a lot of that in a lot of what we do, in a lot of self-expression, in a lot of artistic expression. It's about the individual, sort of, celebrating themselves, which I'm not sure how I feel about, but I understand where it's come from. In the same way that now this I remember this as well, because and I buy that again. This is quite theatrical, the idea that she won't say anything and will be led away, but the suggestion is she's so terrified, and look at him, look at that stare that he's giving her. But if you've watched Doctor Who before, you think she's dead. I mean, you think she has been led to her death. And quite often people are so scared they will silently be led to their doom or allow a creature to consume them or whatever. And again, it's part of the grammar of the way that we tell these stories, and it's certainly a memorable moment. And I think it's Tom Baker's looking very leering and discomforting and alien and powerful and actually very, very scary. Well, and because I'm not the Doctor, yes, I am. I mean, that is sort of nicely alien, the way that he sort of yells that and stares. But I'm not sure there's much method to that performance, because the previous line he's delivered is very Tom Baker as the Doctor going, because I'm precisely not the Doctor. But yes, and I mean, there is that's I think that's quite fun, where you don't actually see, and I love the way his smile turns into a deadpan scariness. But I like the way he opens his hand and you don't actually see what's there, and it's all reliant on Karis's response. I think that's a really effective scene. I like her. Tom Baker's really scary. It's good. It's good. That rather than sort of just show you because we kind of know the dodecahedron's gone. He's holding something in his hand, but it's still just. I mean, it's just a way of keeping it interesting. Yes, but yes. So yes, that I like the humble nature of that little bit of plucky humanity, sort of managing to escape and managing to stop the. There's a gas tack there, just waiting, as though he was just waiting for to do his cue there. That's bizarre, because they were all sort of going through, and maybe there wasn't room at the back for them all, so he was just standing waiting to join them at the end. And one of them, I mean, they've all been in the Rebus operation, haven't they? The guy behind Frederick Treves is wearing Shellac's hat. This is all they've basically the gas tacks have clearly been to the planet Rebus and stolen their outfits from everybody who lives there. Poor old Prentice Hancock's. He's kept hold of the Jethric, but he's had his hat stolen. And actually, Binro the Heretic would have had something to tell them about the going anti-clockwise. But I do think it's quite witty, but it is in that slightly patronising wittiness, which I would call sort of university humour, if I wanted to, of Romana leading them. That's a nice shot, actually, and that's a nice piece of orchestrated action with the Dion's coming and having the close up and then looking up and down. There's actually some quite inventive use of camera in what is a very limited set of spaces. It does feel quite sort of tight in the studio, this whole thing, and he's doing his best with his camera and his half dozen extras. One of whom we got the close up of when they approached the camera in that scene before is Ray Knight, who actually ran an extras agency. And Ray Knight, you can spot. He's sort of got red hair but balding. He's also in Dragonfire as well, I think. But he was the barman in Auf Wiedersehen Pet for a bit as well, who would occasionally sometimes get a line and a credit, and I was always pleased when he did. But Ray Knight actually ran, I don't know if he still does even, ran an extras agency and would also sometimes, hawk himself out as well. So Ray Knight is quite recognisable if you watch television a lot in the 80s. But yes, I feel I've left that slightly hanging about. As somebody that found school difficult, and this is important because the cliffhanger here was something I talked about in school and learnt a lesson. So we'll get to that when we talk about the cliffhanger. But I always felt we were very. My grandmother was a Methodist. We were all very much told not to blow your own trumpet and to be humble, and as a result. I think, one has been sometimes prone to be too shy and not blow one's own trumpet enough. And I'm terrible at circulating and I'm terrible at networking and all those things. And when I see other people who are so good at networking, I'm sad that I never had those skills. This is a decently rendered sequence. It's only a moment, but there's a bit of reverse filming with the tendrils, and I think the bell plants are a little bit literal. They look like tulips, don't they? I think she was waiting. She was a bit waiting there as well. They're a bit too literal, like flowers you would actually see. But in a way, that's quite a good Doctor Who thing, to make something that is reminiscent of a plant on Earth, but make it a giant man-eating version. That's all cool. But they are, yeah. I mean, look at that. It's a giant flower, isn't it? And I think, I mean, they're doing their best here, but it's slightly tatty. And look how close everybody is. I mean, they've tried to give it some depth to the jungle there, but and the shooting is quite inventive, but they are struggling for space. They really are. But anything that's got a laser gun. But now, of course, my generation has said to kids, don't be shy. Try and be creative. You don't have to, always be, good at the stereotypical things of girls don't all have to be good at cooking. Boys don't all have to be good at sports. So, because a lot of us, particularly a lot of people that went into the arts, were people that didn't, weren't comfortable in those stereotypes. And so you say, you should celebrate yourself and not be afraid of being, artistic or dare I say it, not very good at some things. But of course the danger there is you have a lot of people who aren't very, very good at much, but being a little bit too self-confident, despite having not an awful lot to be self-confident about. So you have to be careful which way the pendulum swings. Or again, maybe I'm just old. I absolutely remember this from the first time. I think that is such a simple image. But that it works perfectly with the story. And Tom as Meglos is a great image. Yeah, well done, Karis. That's a very funny odd-shaped gun, though, isn't it? But this is, the story, and it's weird because the next episode of this is really strange and very short. But this feels like it's sort of building to a conclusion. We've got. The Gaztacs are attacking the city that has lost all of its power because its power source has been stolen by the monster that's disguised as the Doctor. It's feeling like it's building to a real climax, which means, and I love laser beams. This fight is. They don't need guns. They don't need to shoot each other. They could poke each other's eyes out with their guns. And this is quite a nifty use of the mistaken identity thing. Again, that's a very theatrical thing there that poor old Karis gets hit on the back of the neck. Me and my friend Anton, we always used to pretend to be Peter Lupus from Mission Impossible. Oh, there we are. Bill Frazer kicking K9. That was his condition for taking the job. It's oddly staged, that though. She's just run into the whole room full of Gaztacs. They've sort of ignored her. But my friend Anton and I used to pretend to be Peter Lupus from Mission Impossible. And so we go, "We've come to mend your telephone," and then karate chop somebody between the shoulders, and they'd fall unconscious. And there we have the dodecahedron. I wonder if it's actually the same one from the Carl Sagan program, because he actually has a little model dodecahedron where he explains all that maths that I tried to explain in the previous episode of Happy Times and Places, where Carl Sagan talked about the threatening aspect of that particular shape to the Pythagoreans, who were the ancient maths guys. Now then, I learnt an important lesson with episode 3 of Meglos. I've talked about this. There's Ray Knight next to the guy who's putting the flaming torch in there. He's balding red-haired underneath that, but you can't see because he's got a cowl on. But he's quite a distinctive-looking fellow. I went into school the day after this, or whenever it was, not the day after this, a couple of days after this, and I was in junior school, and I said to Mrs. Jones, so, we had to write about what we'd done that weekend, and I said, I watched Doctor Who, but they ended it when the flame was burning through the rope, and this stone's going to crush Doctor Who, and why? Why, it's so annoying that they left it at that exciting moment, because, the Doctor's in trouble. And she said, well, of course they leave it at an exciting moment so that you'll tune in to watch it next week. And that taught me an important lesson. It is a good job that General Grugger, as he's about to say, lost a few men. That smile is quite Tom Baker to me rather than Meglos. But I suppose Meglos is assumed the aspect of Tom Baker. But anyway, but if General Grugger hadn't lost some men, Meglos would have nowhere to sit. But yeah, Mrs. Jones said to me, this is, this, them leaving it on the exciting moment will make you tune in next time. And, that gave me an inkling that, it's not just about the story. The storytellers are placing things, for a reason beyond just that it's a television program that's entertaining. There's sort of, there's method to it. And a method beyond just the simple storytelling. That's there's the idea that there's a hook, the idea that there are ups and downs and moments designed to be there in a particular place, not just because that's what the story was. And of course the idea that there were behind the scenes people controlling all of this. This to me as a kid was so terrifying because you see the rope burn through, and exactly what's going to happen, that when the third rope is through, that stone is going to crush Doctor Who. This was, the absolute apex of sort of danger. And the fact that you see the rope start to burn and that's it. That's a very memorable. It's not, if you now, ask me to, list all the memorable cliffhangers in the history of Doctor Who, I wouldn't mention Meglos episode 3, but at the time of watching it, it was huge, it was exciting, and it was, I've got to watch next week. How the hell is Doctor Who going to get out of that? So there we are. That is the end of episode 3 of Meglos. I've got to choose my favourite thing about episode 3 of Meglos. I mean, it would be a very personal one to choose the cliffhanger. I can't really expect Frazer to choose the cliffhanger to episode 3 because I remember talking about it at school the following Monday. I am. So, I know that Terence Dudley was not many people's favorite person. I think he was quite tricky, and I think as a producer he did make a lot of wrong calls with the shows. He was a sort of typical of the kind of job for life, internal BBC staff member, creative, and all that was problematic about that system. Much as there's plenty to celebrate about that system as well. But I actually think some of his camera work on that was really interesting, particularly with what felt like a lack of space. The bell plants I was expecting to be a bit dismissive of, but the idea that there are, it's a difficult one because I never like Doctor Who when it's a little bit too literal. You go, it's an alien, and let's just make it a bigger version of an Earth thing. But actually, then when you have something that is recognizable from our Earth and turned on its head and made threatening, I celebrate that. Maybe it's because those giant flowers look more comical than, say, a kid in a gas mask or a murderous telephone flex, or all those things that are genuinely frightening. Whereas there's something about a giant red daffodil that perhaps would not be haunting my nightmares. And they're not a monster I think much about. And I seem to recall, I think one of the books, is it the Discontinuity Guide or I think it might be the Discontinuity Guide or the Program Guide, or one of the books talks about how they were. The press did make a bit of a deal about them at the time, and they end up not featuring very much at all. But that happened with quite a few things. I remember thinking of plants, the day of the Triffids, the TV version. There was a lot in the pre-publicity made of the Triffid gun, the anti-Triffid gun, and it's in like 2 scenes. So there's quite often things like that actually more time was spent publicising them than was actually spent putting them into the programmes, which seems quite bizarre in this day and age when that sort of stuff is much more sort of formally done and seen through. But that means I'm you know, and a lot of the shortcomings of Meglos are because they seem to me totemic of the way that television was made at that time, and the problems that television makers had at those times, and had to use all the skill at their disposal to overcome, which meant that when they did overcome them, you as a viewer were full of admiration and grateful, because you knew when you knew you were watching something. There was there's never an attempt to disguise the fact that you were watching people acting on a set. It couldn't hide it. I mean, there was an unspoken understanding that there was a certain, we were privy to a certain amount of artifice, but when directors, actors, producers, creatives went to an effort to try and at least break out from the conventions that were dictated by the artifice, we as viewers were grateful. Whereas I think the modern viewer, looks at that and just goes, that's not very convincing. Well, we knew it was at a base level not hugely convincing. Because it was more like watching a stage play in that sense. We knew we were watching a production that was being mounted, but it appealed to us when either the quality of the acting, made us forget that. That's what happens in the theatre. You forget you're watching actors on stage because they transport you with the truth of what they're doing. Well, TV drama transports you because the directors either staged it in a really inventive way, or again, the actors are doing something really interesting, or the writing is such that it seizes your imagination, that it's not that you don't know you're not watching something that's real, but you forget. I mean, when we're watching modern television, we know we're not watching something real, but of course, one of the main focuses is to make you wouldn't allow a shot in now that was self-consciously artificial. Sometimes special effect shots aren't pulled off despite everybody's best hopes, or look a bit cheap or whatever. But you wouldn't be allowed to have something that looked like it was a set in the way that I think we were more accepting of then. But I still haven't said what I like best about. I do like that scene where the Doctor lures Caris in, and then shows her the it's not the Doctor, it's Meglos, the whatever it is that's in his hand. I don't know, I just find that very memorable. But I also like the Earthman. But did I choose the Earthman for episode 1? The fact that Meglos takes over a bespectacled city gent. But I like the Earthman's rebellion, and I do remember that from the time. But then again, I remember the cliffhanger from the time. I'm quite liking Terence Dudley's camera movement too. What shall I choose? I think I like the Earthman's rebellion because she's such a small part. Nobody's ever going to talk about the Earthling from Meglos, but I remember that so vividly, and it seemed to me to be a lesson that even an image we would take for granted, the besooted city gent, everything that seems sort of unthreatening and quintessentially British or whatever, that humble British thing. It's not a big patriotic clarion call. It's a sort of low key, and associated with sort of just old fashioned manners and that sort of thing. Could have a sort of plucky interior that was a match for a cruel alien walking cactus. So is it the Earth? Is it the Earthlings? Is that too close to what I chose before? Do I choose the cliffhanger? No, I'm going to choose Or do I choose that scene with Karras in the... And I haven't even chosen Brotterdag yet, and I love Brotterdag and Gregor. Bill Frazer kicking canine because of all the... But, because that gives a nice little story to why he agreed to do the job and all of that. And that becomes part of the mythology, and that's quite fun. Oh, no, I chose Jacqueline Hill, didn't I? I chose Jacqueline Hill for episode 1. So I'm definitely choosing, the Earthling's rebellion and everything that the Earthling represents. That image, but also, that sort of plucky resolve, and it's very Doctor Who-y, the juxtaposition between a stereotypical city gent and spooky alien shenanigans, and because that second time when the Earthling rebels, that image is exactly as it was in my head, and I see it there and I go, I know I can see it now, but that's also what resides in my memory banks from when I watched it the very first time. And that's not bad going, seeing as I watched it for the very first time when it went out, which was, oh my God, 42 years ago. I was 6. Oh, the humanity. Oh, the humanity. Frazer Gregory, who I was probably not born when Meglos was on. Let's have a look to see what he likes about episode 3 of Meglos. Will it be the Earthling and his rebellion? Probably not.
Hi again, everyone. Time for episode 3's favourite thing, and for this one I have picked Romana's outfit. Watching the documentary on the Warriors Gate DVD, Lala's Wardrobe, Lala Ward doesn't seem particularly fond of this outfit, but for me, I think this is the best outfit that she was given to wear as Romana. It's a June Hudson classic with the sort of the crimson and the red, which really suits Lala Ward, but it's got those sort of lace sleeves that give it a very pirate feel, which I think fits really nicely with Grugger and the Gaztecs and that band of pirates. Obviously the red really does suit her in it. It really has this elfin quality that is so very Lala Ward. She looks gorgeous in it, and I think it's a really beautiful costume. So that is my favourite thing about episode 3 of Meglos.
Yeah, that's not a bad choice. And I don't know why that costume is not talked about. I tend not to think of, when I think of Lala Ward's costumes, I obviously think of the brilliant, sort of nautically one from the Leisure Hive. I love her sort of, slight shadow of the Doctor one in the Horns of Naimon, where she's, kind of a prototype sort of Doctor twin. The schoolgirl outfit, which I think throws up all sorts of interesting conversations, not all of them necessarily comfortable ones in City of Death, but as an aesthetic, it's great. It's fantastic. There's Lala Ward wears some great costumes. I think she's got a really good eye for costume, because I think she, weighed in with her opinions about what she should be wearing and collaborated with the costume designers. And I know had arguments too, because I know that Doreen James and her didn't see eye to eye on at least one occasion. But June Hudson is an icon of Doctor Who and a marvellous person, but also I think her style very much suits the show, and actually the look of the show is probably more dependent on June Hudson than it is on the set designers, really, at this in this period sometimes. And whilst I don't like the fact that the Doctor doesn't change costume in season 18, I think there's perhaps an over reliance on that burgundy look that does then feed into the aesthetic of the rest of the show, which makes season 18 feel quite sumptuous, which I approve of. I also prefer, I think, when the Doctor retains a basic silhouette but changes elements of it. And I suppose in this, at least he doesn't have the jacket on in that opening TARDIS scene, so it adds a little bit to the realism there. But Romana changes her costumes every time, or most times. And Romana's costumes are a talking point. Indeed, they've been the subject of a documentary on the DVD range, but nobody really talks about that one, and it's a beautiful red colour with that lovely then white lace that complements it. So I think that's an excellent choice. I don't know why nobody talks about that costume that much, and I'm glad that Frazer chose it, but it is not what I chose. I will now not be able to choose that for episode 4, but if he chooses the Earthling, if he chooses Jacqueline Hill, even if he chooses that bit of music later on, I still could get some points somewhere along the line. But I think I have probably I have no chance of getting this one back. But at least it's not the power source that that stops me from being destroyed by wanton plant life on the planet I've got to live on forever. But let's wait for next episode to get into that. But anyway. I think I'm going to lose this one, as is the guy that looks like a spiky green version of me. So at least we'll lose together. But you can come and bear witness to that as the story changes slightly next week and becomes something else entirely for not a very long amount of time. But so tune in on the next episode for truncated times and places. But for now, they're more than satisfied with being happy ones. Well, hello everybody. It's time for the final part of Meglos, which I hope takes you to happy times and places, although it has to be said the times are somewhat truncated, even if the places are all present and correct, and it's pretty much all of the places of the whole story, because we go back to Zolfathura in this final episode. The image I have in my head of this is lots of sort of wandering around the scene sync stuff in that sort of night, isn't it? And I do remember watching this when it went out. I sort of remember the bit where the two Tom Bakers face each other, and other little images. And it's funny, isn't it, how those images from the first time we watched it stay in our head, even though I've seen this many times since. But I still feel I still recall the sort of feel and the vague ambience of where I was when I watched this when it went out. And this is I remember season 17, mostly I remember bits bits from each story, but season 18 was when I was probably my first proper season, maybe as a fan. I don't know, it's difficult. I was certainly excited by Doctor Who when I watched season 17, but I don't know, it somehow felt more complete an experience, or maybe I was more in control of it, or whatever. Watching season 18, I remember I have very strong memories of this as a boy, which was a long time ago. And Meglos, I enjoyed as much as any of the others. There was no stylistic difference between Meglos to me and any of the other stories. In fact, as I say, I'm the sort of maths in a lay-by of Logopolis, its subtleties and intricacies were slightly lost on me, and I was desperate for it not to be about changing tyres or wandering around with a ruler. But that's just me. I do understand the great beauties of Logopolis now, and I'm probably sometimes in more of a mood to watch Logopolis now than I am Meglos. But I think Meglos, trots away and is it doesn't outstay its welcome, as we will discover. It almost decides to end the party rather early. So let us watch from the beginning, as I hope you are going to enjoy the 19 or so minutes of Meglos, Part 4, in 3, 2, 1. Now, of course, I've got to remember to be on the eye out for something I like about this episode, but also for something I like about the whole of Meglos. Somebody on my Patreon page, God bless them, has checked, and Crawford Logan is credited with playing Meglos. I think I might have said this on one of the previous episodes, but is credited with playing Meglos on the Blu-ray. So somebody found that bit of paper, if there was a bit of paper, or somebody listened to my podcast. It doesn't matter, so long as it is correct. That is all I'm after. Now, this is fascinating, isn't it? Because they've started 2 scenes before the final scene. So, it's a short episode, but it's also a short episode that has quite a lot of footage we've already seen. It's James Gould, by the way. Thank you, James, who went to the trouble to check the season 18 production notes to see that Crawford Logan was correctly credited as the voice of Meglos in part 1. So we're still on footage from that. Now Frazer has chosen Romana's costume, so I'm now looking at it, and it's not only is it a gorgeous sort of scarlet colour, it has flowers on it, so it's sort of apposite for the planet, the surface of the planet. It's like her costume in some way is a symbolic representation of the psychotic vegetable life of the planet Tigella that they're going to be kind of just numbered with at the end of the story, because they don't actually get the dodecahedron back, do they? The costumes are great. I think the color scheme, the purple or pink and black always goes well together. I remembered around this time at school, one of the great things that we had as children that was akin to rocket science when I was a boy, which you might not be, which you might not have had, and the young amongst you won't realise. This Tom, I think, is slightly doing his. It's his slightly half-assed cliffhanger acting. Can I say that? And slightly, there's a slight sort of comical edge. Look, he does the sort of, he's not being entirely serious when he does that, and he's not being entirely committed to it. I don't think he does occasionally do a cliffhanger ending, like at the end of The Sunmakers, where he kind of does a. Now that final shot, no. Fair enough, he's kind of going for it there, but I'm still not sure he's entirely committed to it. Anyway, so now we're in. I think it's something like, is that about 3.5 minutes? And then we have 50 seconds at the end for the closing title. So that's about just over 4 minutes 20, something like that. So of the 19 minutes, we still only get about 15 minutes. But anyway, yes, the rocket science that we had when I was younger was that because pink and black, you'd think, oh, they're opposites, they don't work, but you'd have coloured pens, like felt tip pens, like a black one, and you'd get this white one as well. And if you painted something black, coloured something in black, you could then put this white one through it, and it would strip away some of the colour, and it would be pink. It would make it pink, and it did that with other colours as well. There would be a pen would basically be a felt tip would be 2 colours, one colour on the pen top and one colour on the pen base or whatever, and you could have hours of fun. That was science to us. I remember my nan got me a set of them for Christmas, and yes, it was basically your 5 or 6 felt tip pens, but it was 2 felt tip pens because you could do a clever thing with this white ink, and I've completely forgotten about those until seeing, because that pink and that black of the Dion's costumes were pretty much the 2 ends of the scale on the black felt tip. He's got wonderful eyes. I mean, it's a sort of boggle eye off, isn't it? Tom Baker and Bill Frazer. And I was gonna say, you don't get beards like that anymore. But actually, I've just watched that rather wonderful episode of The Last of Us with Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman, and they're better than General Grugger's beard, but they are still applied beards. So I was going to say, yeah, you don't get beards like that anymore. You kind of do. There's actually some very nice... Terence Dudley shoots some of these close-ups very, very nicely, and I think the lighting is very effective in this story. And this... I wonder. I mean, bits of people keep disappearing with the CSO here. I mean, I kind of applaud the ambition, and I like these big screens. But I mean, Meglos hasn't got any legs there. I mean, he's almost sort of fading into the sand. But I don't know. And as I say, I used to be very worried about CSO in the older days. I wonder if it's been slightly improved. Excuse me, I yawned then. That's nothing to do with Meglos. It's to do with the fact that it's quite late, and I'm doing this at the end of. Oh God, I mean, Tom Baker looks like he was walking. He was Long John Silver on both legs there. The lovely running joke about the doctor's coat, which I like. It's a rather nice coat. Now that he's finished playing the Doctor, there we are. I mean, that's because it hadn't been announced, and I don't think he'd even decided that he wasn't playing the Doctor anymore. So, that's a joke that actually ends up being where time actually gives it a resonance that it didn't have at the time, because it hadn't been announced that he was leaving at this point. So I'm pretty certain anyway. I'm pretty certain. No, I know it wasn't. I remember when Warriors Gate was on, I was anticipating, when Tom Baker was gonna be leaving. I knew by then that he was leaving. I'm pretty certain. Let's not get into that. That's not what these are for. You can look up dates. I'm not going to look up dates before these. These are reactions, memories, observations. Right. So this scene is an extraordinary thing. So we've had no establishing that where Lexa is. The start of the scene, she's got her back to camera, and within seconds of the scene, she's done the sort of jump in front of a gun to save Romana. It doesn't look like that in the execution. I mean, Lalla Ward then gives it some real gravitas. She looks desperately sad in the close-up after the extra who's had his gun rather shabbily kicked away, half-heartedly kicked away by Crawford Logan. It's still within his reach, and presumably what it was he was mortally injured, and he went to shoot Romana, and then he died. And Lexa jumped in the way of the laser beam. But that is not what happens on screen. Basically, everyone's saying goodbye. You then see him shoot, and there's a bit of, if it's not ADR, it's certainly a sort of cursory off camera shout of "Look out, Romana" or whatever. He then sort of goes to sleep. Crawford Logan sort of half-heartedly kicks the gun, but not at actually any distance. And Lexa's dead, and Romana gives it, that beefy, hefty, she saved my life that is a staple of such occasions. But it didn't look like that she did. And also, I mean, I'm baffled as to why. Had they even met? I'm not sure they had. But even if they had not, I mean, I would say not enough. I think that's one of the most shoddily executed scenes in the whole of Doctor Who history. So it does feel slightly frayed at the edges. I'm sort of pleased that it exists, because it sort of shows how those sort of scenes could, how more often things like that could happen with the Time Against Doctor Who and the difficulties of multi-camera. And Terence Dudley hasn't shot all of this particularly badly. And in fact, I did like the fact that the big stone temple building had a ceiling on it as well, so he could get some quite low angles, because you don't normally see ceilings in Doctor Who. And occasionally we've had sets that have had ceilings for artistic purposes, but that was a practical ceiling because you had to see the stone. But anyway, it meant that all the angles there were nice. And I think it's fun that it's now night on Zulfa Thura, because it means that when the TARDIS landed, you could basically land it in front of a black backcloth and just have a bit of this throbbing of the dodecahedron is beautiful. And I like these. I like these. The model that everyone's been sort of projected onto. I think it's ambitious, and I think it looks rather good, and I do love a model anyway. There's something, and this is quite fun because he's only a supporting artiste with Scholak from the Rebos Operations helmet. You could throw in a line where they say, we've just been to the planet Rebos and pilfered some bodies, but. This is the same as this. Well done him for going to grab the coat and then not. I think that's quite funny, and we can afford that because he's only an extra. Grugger and Brotadak are doing the talking, and anyway, they're now very much secondary villains because Meglos is the main threat. So the fact that a sort of walk on. A piratical supernumerary is left holding the screen up, I think is quite fun. Romana leading Grugger and Brotadak round, the wrong way and outwitting them there does undermine them slightly. But they're comedy villains anyway. So if anyone wanted to argue that diluted the threat somewhat, I'd accept it. But I think having a stupid guard is all well and good. Quite now, why he's just walked in though and not said anything. Well, we know why he hasn't said anything because he's not allowed to. He's an extra, as is Bruce Callender there, just walking off. And then there's the. I noticed because I don't think they quite rationalise who was in the spaceship of the Gaztax and who's now on the planet. It's whoever was booked for various days, I think. But Tony Aleph is the big one with the big bald one with the moustache. He's in a couple of Bond films, I think, and did a few. I think there's a few other Doctor Who's, but only as a supporting artiste. But again, they are because he was somewhere Mediterranean. Was he Greek, something like that? And there's. Yes, there are different ethnicities amongst the Gaztac extras, and yes, it's fun. It's fun spotting. It's because this is not a bad one for extras actually. I think David Cleave is one of the Dions as well, and he dates back. Well, he's one of the few people who was credited as an actor, David Woolliscroft, in the Space Museum, who then ends up sort of doing supporting work and is an extra as David Cleave, from Time Warrior, something like that. And he was also the partner of Charles Pemberton, who's a Cyberman in Tomb of the Cybermen, who actually did do quite a lot of acting work, usually playing sort of rotund mayors and mustachioed policemen. Both of their pictures hang in the Club for Acts and Actors, where I occasionally hang around. Oh, well, actually, I hang around when I'm in London. I'm a member, and I love this repeated punch is it's quite funny. They've done the gag. The doctor goes, "Oh, that looks painful," and then he gets delivered exactly the same. That's all quite fun. With one of the more famous names, famous as in the sort of neck of the woods that I hang about in the Club for Acts and Actors. Occasionally we get Frank Williams, who was the vicar in Dad's Army, and Michael Leader, who was the milkman in EastEnders, but he's also one of the pteroleptils at the end of the Visitation. And he claimed, I heard him once claiming to be the stormtrooper who banged his head on the door. That stormtrooper, the Woodstock of stormtroopers that every supporting artiste who was in Star Trek claims to have been that Stormtrooper Woodstock. But anyway, Pamela Cundell used to hold court drinking port in the Club for Acts and Actors, Mrs. Fox from Dad's Army, and she was the wife of Bill Frazer. And I would occasionally chat to Pamela, and she was lovely. So I'm 1 degree from Bill Frazer, but he died. And of course he was casting K9 and Company as well, so he seemed very much around at this time. I remember being on Wogan as well. I like the way that Tom Baker is quite insolent with his villains. I was thinking of Zygons the other day, where he says, wave a tentacle. And he does the grin in the way, but the way he sort of sits with his arms folded, or his, and he's just kind of like, yeah, there's nothing more insulting if you're a grandstanding villain than a sort of shabby Time Lord not being in awe of you, And when he's doing the sort of cold, almost psychotic Meglos. He's he is very, very unsettling. As I said the other day, I don't think it's a massively consistent performance. And this is another one of those scenes that is kind of, shockingly executed. The poor old extra, Bruce Callender here, has been told to sort of stand there grinning at the dog. And then he gets smacked on the head by a rock, which doesn't knock him out. But then he has to stand there and doesn't react, so has to get shot twice. Because they just have to sort of bridge that gap, and they go, well, let's bridge it by shooting it twice. And he's hitting his marks, and he's turning around, and he's marking that, and then he's falling down. But because there's no cutting, because it's multi-camera, because everything has to sort of be marked, and it's got to have the space for the special effects. Oh, it's clunky. And I mean, I think we noticed that stuff as kids. We sort of went, and because K9's gun always as well, because I think it's very difficult to get the geometry right, isn't it? Would quite often, that's great. He's got a blaster, and he's got the blast comes out of his nose, but actually, depending on where it needed to hit the actor, there's the famous one, isn't there, in Nightmare of Eden? It sort of goes at a sort of funny angle. Although, that was a slightly spread beam to get away with that. It's interesting that they don't bother to do any of the good guys are hoodwinked by Meglos or have to spend a bit of... I have to say, as somebody that's used to these kinds of stories, I'm quite pleased that we don't sort of waste our time with going, but which one is Doctor Who and which one is Meglos? But they really don't bother at all. Meglos immediately goes, I am the bad guy. And they go, okay, there we go. But I quite like that it slips away and we get to see we get to see the do you want to be atomized? No. I love that. I love the City Gent. And Meglos, of course, was going to be brought back in The Lodger, wasn't he? He was going to be the bad guy in the Matt Smith story, The Lodger, and the whole idea was going to be that the Doctor would go, Meglos, no, I don't remember you, which I would have found at once really annoying, because I don't like Doctor Who not paying homage to its past and not respecting what has come before, but also really, really funny, because something can be both of those things. What is it they say in the League of Gentlemen when they eat human flesh, isn't it? What is it? I know it's wrong, but it feels so good. You can laugh at things that you kind of know deep down you don't approve of. And that's fine, Five Forts, sinking, all of that. It's and sadly we don't see this final scene. That model's great, actually. I love all of that. I love the thing rising out of the planet and sinking back down, and it makes a virtue of that scene sink stuff. So, are we to understand that this main power source of the planet Tygella is now just gone, and look at everyone's at the back sort of indulging in deforestation, which is, they've been hiding all their lives. I know there's been an argument saying, we should do that, but I suspect they'll find it harder now they don't have the source of all their power. It would have been nice. Actually, no, would it have been nice to see him return? No, I quite like the fact that he gets the close-up at the end, the dear old Earthling. Damn, sorry, because I've had remote control trouble, so I'm doing it on my phone. So by the time I called that up to do the closing credits, it had vanished. But we've had this. You've had my tirade about online streaming services jumping away from the credits with criminal speed. So I think you know where I stand on that. So that was a very short episode of Doctor Who. Oh, I have poor lovely Bernard sleeping next to me. You okay, pal? We've had a slightly rotten day. We had an altercation with a mean dog in the park, and then a mean man. But then when I managed to be calm about the whole thing. Now, of course, I've rehearsed millions of things I'd have loved to have said, but in the circumstances, I think logic tells me I was right to deflate the situation with the scary man with the scary dog. And God bless two members of the public who called me over and made sure I was all right and assured me that he was entirely in the wrong and I was entirely in the right. And that was nice. But anyway, so we've had quite a stressful day, haven't we, Bernard? So Bernard has been pressed right into me sleeping as I was watching Meglos Part 4, and not had a good, not a good evening, really. It's sort of detoxing from that by kind of not doing very much, but I felt I needed to do something with the day. And of course, what is Doctor Who if it is not, an escape from the genuine struggles and fears of life into... And I sort of forgot about it for, I was going to say 25 minutes, but that would have been optimistic. But as soon as it finished, I was back in the real world, and I'm just making sure that Bernard's all right, because he got rather stressed, because he got sort of chest thumped by this over-enthusiastic dog. And then I got threatened by his owner after I suggested that he put his dog on a leash, who kept coming back for more. Anyway, you don't need to hear about that, but I think it's an illustration. It's cathartic, isn't it, just to say stuff out loud? Yeah, I'm not going to pretend it's of any use to this podcast, but it is sometimes useful to say things out loud. I say a lot of things out loud, but I find that does help the demons to go away a little bit. That's why that's why people go into therapy, isn't it? Some people have therapy. Some people have watching a Doctor Who story, trying to find the nice things about it, and also, having your cares for the day get washed away. The winds of time will wash us clean. Well, so will the jungles of Tigella. So anyway, I like that. I like that line in episode 1 as well. I've got that where Zastor says about the Doctor sees the threads that bind the universe together and mend them when they break. I've just remembered that. See, even a story that has all sorts of problems with its writing and its execution has glorious and lovely moments within. So I've got to choose a favourite moment from episode 4, or a favourite thing about episode 4, and a favourite thing overall. And I've chosen, for episode 1, I chose Jacqueline Hill, which I still think Frazer might choose. For episode... I can't remember what I've chosen now. Oh no, for episode 2 I chose that piece of music, didn't I? And that piece of music that goes through a whole couple of scenes and was on Doctor Who the music. For episode 3 I chose the Earthman and the image of the city gent and that visual of him pulling out and pulling away from Meglos. So I can't have any of those 3 things, and if Frazer chooses any of those 3 things as his thing for episode 4, I mean, he can't choose all of them because they're not all in episode 4, or his thing overall, his bonus thing, then I might claw a point back. But even if he chooses 2 things that I choose now or have already chosen, he's still beaten me. I'm still going to get nowhere with Meglos, but that's okay because it's done its job. It's entertained me, and it's taken me out of the real world, which I was quite happy for it to do. So, I spend my life just trying to be nice and reasonable and affable. People are still mean. I think that's the thing that depresses me more than anything. So you go, I really do try to give nobody a reason to be horrible to me. But some people are still. But I always try and give people the benefit of the doubt and go, well, what must their life be like? What must they be feeling? Not in a victorious way. I don't like that kind of, you've probably got a shit life, so I don't think that. It's more, what state of mind they must be in to be so quick to be threatening and unkind. Maybe he's been taken over by a spiky cactus and therefore was not in control of himself. There we go. We'll give him the benefit. He did have a rather wispy beard. I mean, he could have taken me out, I'm sure. Well, I know. It was wiry and aggressive, and I am bumbling, and my muscles are knitted together with tweed. But I had a much better set of facial hair than him. yes, wispy like a cactus spike was his excuse for a moustache. I could have flayed him with my tongue. Now, you see, you have to laugh as well, isn't it? That's what Doctor Who teaches you. That's why I sort of forgive sometimes Tom Baker his cavalier attitude towards the drama. I mean, he is naughty, but he was my first Doctor, and he's the Doctor, if any, that tells us that, the way to deal with the violent and the threatening and the pompous and the self-aggrandizing and the downright nasty is to deflate it, and to defeat it with humor. I mean, I didn't defeat it with humor then. I defeated it with, just being very calm and not inflaming the situation. But I'll have to turn it into humor from here on in, because, well, I won't. What I'll do is I'll replay it in my head over and over again between now and the day I die, thinking of all the things I should have said and done. And will make myself watch Doctor Who in order to forget it. So, listen, this episode has been longer than even the episode 4 of Meglos should have been. I am going to choose, I'm not going to choose the death of Lexa. I'm not going to choose the scene where the guard gets zapped twice by K9. My favourite thing about episode 4 and my favourite thing about Meglos as a whole. Well, I think my favourite thing about episode 4 is probably the gag about the coat. I do like the gag about the coat, and that the line about now he's finished playing the Doctor is rather fun, even though I don't think the dates quite tie up. Don't write in. I'll check immediately after this to satisfy myself, and if I'm right, I'll be pleased, and if I'm wrong, oh well, never mind, because I do not research for these. I research for the other ones. These are the ones I just try and do off the top of my head, because I can't spend every minute of every day preparing for these. So I'm writing a book about Quatermass, don't you know? And walking my dog to get peaceful and relaxed in the park that I get threatened in. Right, shush. I think the joke about the coat is my favourite thing about episode 4. And I think my favourite thing about the whole of Meglos is that wonderful story. And I remember, because I'd not remembered the character, I have to say, having watched it. And then I got the book. And the book was one of the, as I say, one of the few books that I got not that long after broadcast. It was a story that was still quite fresh to me. And I got the target novel. And again, I tended to get the target novels to try and picture the stories I hadn't seen or couldn't see. So the idea of reading Meglos when I kind of knew Meglos, but enough time, there was no chance of ever watching it on video or anything in those days. So I did read the book. And I remember being thoroughly taken with the character of Brotadak. And I tried to imagine what he would look like, and I couldn't imagine him. As I say, I couldn't remember him from the TV version. And then I remember watching this thing called Brat Farrar that had Mark Greenstreet as twins in it, actually, and had was it Hannah Gordon or Prunella Scales? I think it was Hannah Gordon, maybe. And they got top billing over Mark Greenstreet. Frederick Treves and the woman, whoever it was, got credited over Mark Greenstreet, even though he was, did the most in it. So I thought, well, they must be very famous, but I don't know this Frederick Treves. And then I'd see him pop up in other things. And it was only when I got the Doctor Who magazine and the programme, the episode guide, that I thought, well, I need to, because I knew Bill Frazer had played General Gregory. I knew that. I knew by that time Jacqueline Hill had been Lexa. I said, well, let's see who plays Brotadak then. And I imagined him to be sort of a young, cheeky actor. I hadn't quite registered in the book that he was, as old and grizzled as Grugger. And I was shocked to see it was Frederick Treves. So even then I was going, I can't rationalise that brigadiery, ministery type, tweed-jacketed sort of, posh guy actor, as John Deere says on my Twitter page. Isn't he the Minister of Defence or whatever? He's the General Chief of Defence Staff in Yes, Prime Minister. But he popped up in all sorts of stuff. And his son, Simon Treves, is a working actor today. And, of course, Frederick Treves has the same name as the Frederick Treves who looked after the Elephant Man. And, indeed, Frederick Treves is in the Elephant Man. And I think he is a relation of the Frederick Treves who was the guy that looked after Joseph John Merrick, the Elephant Man. So that's all nice, too. But, anyway, so. The long and the short of it is, and then, of course, I did, was told that story or read that story or whatever, that Brotadak is so called, and it's a great name. I called him Brotadak, I think, when I read the book. But Brotadak, as the spelling of the series is, but not in the book, because it was changed between the series and the book, because John Nathan Turner discovered its true meaning, which is that Brotadak is an anagram of bad actor, because John Flanagan and Andrew McCulloch thought it would be a bad actor who would play the part. And when Frederick Treves was told this or discovered this, he, gleefully rang up his wife to tell her. So it was all taken in good spirit. And of course, he's not a bad actor at all. But I have to say, even when I read it in the episode guide, I was like, I cannot imagine it being that actor. And then when I watched it, when I finally got it on video, I still sort of thought he was unrecognizable, because he's much scrawnier than you'd imagine, and he were and you didn't normally see him with stubble. And anyway, yeah, so it's a complete transformation, and he has great fun, and he's very good, and I like the joke. So I like the character, I like the joke, I like that it's that actor, I like that it's that actor completely unrecognizable. I like that actor's been in Doctor Who, but he's been in Doctor Who not playing a senior army official or a government type, but playing that and having a great time doing it. I mean, he is quite eye-popping and face-pulling, and the way he does the cliffhanger for episode 2 is, that up 2 or 3 octaves, because it's dramatic sci-fi acting stuff. It's Stephen Fry does it. I've mentioned this in other podcasts, I'm sure, where it's a Blackadder set in the future, and Stephen Fry plays this. Hugh Laurie played this double-headed alien. I think Patsy Burns, the third head. I think it's a triple-headed alien, and he has a line where he says, "Sent into the sprouting chamber," and that sort of up a couple of notes into a screech is very much the same as "She's seen too much, kill her." So it's all going on with Brotadak. There's a history to it. There's a story behind it. Even the change between the televised version and the book version. There's so much going on from that one simple thing, calling that a character. It's a character, but the interest in it spins off in so many different directions, and that's what I love about Doctor Who, is that you can have occasions like that most people watching it won't know or care about that, but if you want, you can spin that occurrence, that character, that name, into all sorts of different directions, from the actor playing it to the change to the story behind it to the what the actor playing it did when he was told, and all of that. Boom, 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 boom. Love it. So it's a double whammy for Brotadak, really. It's the coat gag is my favourite thing of episode 4, and my bonus thing for the whole thing is Brotadak, the naming, the casting, the very existence, and all the brouhaha that surrounds him. So, what are Frazer's 2 things for this episode of Happy Times and Places, where he, will choose his favourite thing for episode 4 and his favourite bonus overall thing. So let us choose episode 4 first. Hello, come in, Frazer. Come in, Frazer.
Hello again, everybody. Episode 4, and my favourite thing that I have picked for episode 4 is the jungle of Tigella. Don't honestly think that Doctor Who has managed to produce a bad jungle, and I think this one is up there with all the greats we've had through the Tom Baker era. So Creature from the Pit, Face of Evil, Planet of Evil, all fantastic jungles, and this one is no exception. The thing that I really like about the jungle on Tigella, though, and that is the thing that I am actually picking is the sound of the jungle. I just love that it sounds just like the planet of the Daleks and the Dalek master plan. It has those sort of weird alien screeches that are instantly recognisable and instantly take you to a Doctor Who planet, a Doctor Who alien jungle. So the sound of Tigella is my fourth favourite thing about Meglos.
Well, very, very good. I'm at a disadvantage there because, unfortunately, with the sound, because doing this, I'm chatting through it. I do love the jungle sounds of Doctor Who. I particularly love them in the 60s. And I do think that jungle, I do think Doctor Who has an illustrious history of jungles. And the Tigella one, I suppose, doesn't get talked about that much. And when it does, it's the attention focuses on the bell plants and those sequences, which were, publicity or talk of the time was attention was drawn to them, and they're actually just quite a quick moment, quite cursory in their screen time and execution. But I cannot criticize Frazer's choice. It is not a bad jungle at all. I didn't really hear what it sounded like this time around, but if it's got those and all of that, the 60s sounds, if they've used that tape, then I love that tape, and I love all the noises of Doctor Who's sound is very, very special. So Meglos bonus thing from Frazer, but yeah, that's a good choice. Wasn't one of my choices. See, we're spoilt for choice even with dear old Meglos. So bonus thing, come in again, Frazer.
So for my fifth and final bonus thing, that is the thing that I love about Meglos, I have picked the incomparable, indomitable, indefatigable Jacqueline Hill. What more can I say about Jacqueline Hill that hasn't been said before? She's just an absolute legend of Doctor Who. Barbara sets the tone, sets the standard for companions. You see her DNA running right through into Rose and Amy and everyone else we've had ever since. Obviously in Meglos, though, she's not playing Barbara, she's playing Lexa, so she comes in and plays a completely different character, but gives her such grace and stature and credibility and gravitas. She's just wonderful. She's just wonderful. That role could have been so much less than what it was, but Jacqueline Hill comes in and just, you can't take your eyes off her. Every time she's on the screen, and your heart just fills with so much warmth when you see her. So yeah, Jacqueline Hill is my bonus thing to love about Meglos.
Well, we're back where we started, because Jacqueline Hill was my choice for episode 1, and it was I was slightly game playing there, because I didn't doubt for a second that Frazer would choose Jacqueline Hill, so I got in there early. Although I love that bit where she goes, "Then where?" in episode 1. So it wasn't entirely gamesmanship, but I suspected she'd be along sooner rather than later. Well, I was wrong about that, because she was around as late as possible. But so I scramble a tiny little scintilla of joy just at the end, after a rather barren 4 episodes. Just at the end, something comes along and shows me that life is okay. Which is a bit like my altercation in the park, when those 2 nice passers-by stopped and just made sure I was all right. Offered to walk me home as well. I clearly don't look like I could look after myself, and I fantasize about doing kung fu. But anyway, perhaps kung fu is, I was not born to do kung fu. I was born to, identify extras in episodes of Doctor Who. Somebody's got to do it. Have they? Somebody's got it. Well, I'm doing it anyway. So look, it's nice to have someone to talk to, even though I'm not talking directly to any of you. I like communicating with people, and sharing my love of this stuff, and I hope you do too. It's what lights up the darkness in my world, and I'm sure in yours, which is why when you're not watching Doctor Who, you're listening to some brat talking about it. And presumably a lot of you are walking your dogs right now, because that's when I do my podcast listening to. So, if you are set up, if during this walk, when you're trying to enjoy me talking about episode 4 of Meglos, you are set upon by some miscreants, equally miscreanty hound, just remember to de-escalate the situation and come home and watch Meglos Part 4, and all your cares will go away. And I'm sure next time I speak to you, this will be slightly less fresh in my mind. But as I say, I know it will never quite go away. Isn't that mad? Oh dear, life. But anyway, we must not give it its. We must not give it any power, must we? Much like what's happened to the poor residents of Tygella. Anyway, look, off we go. Take good care of yourselves. It's a jungle out there.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
Well, so before you write in, let's get it out of the way. Tom Baker announced that he was leaving Doctor Who on the 3rd of November 1980, so it was after, indeed, the broadcast and production of Meglos. Now, had he decided before that and word got out and they'd stuck that into the... I don't know. Things seem to happen a lot closer to the wire in those days. And anyway, by the time Warrior's Gate was on, because there was a gap in transmission because it was done over Christmas time and all of that, I did know that Tom Baker was leaving Doctor Who. So yes, I associate Warrior's Gate with knowing that Tom Baker's on the way out, and not Meglos, because we didn't know then. So how that ties in with Brotodak's line about now that he's not playing the Doctor, that may have been as a result of stuff happening behind the scenes or whatever, but it certainly wasn't in my noggin, and certainly wouldn't have occurred to anybody watching at the time, because as far as anybody was concerned, Tom Baker was still playing Doctor Who. They didn't find out that he wasn't going to be for a few weeks after Meglos had finished. I knew my memory wasn't cheating me. However, I've gotten out to look at Brat Farrar, which I was convinced said at the beginning, starring Frederick Treves and either Hannah Gordon or Prunella Scales and Mark Greenstreet, and with Dominique Barnes as well, in Brat Farrar. And I've just had to look at it on a little bit of it on YouTube, where it seems to have all been edited together. I don't know, I haven't looked at the whole thing, but the opening titles don't have any cast mentioned at all, and the closing titles, Mark Greenstreet gets top billing as Brat Farrar, and the other character that he played. There is a Doctor Who connection, by the way, because Terence Dix was in the production. And it's Angela Brown is the actress. Frederick Treves is in it, but so is Francis Matthews, and he actually seems to be... he's certainly higher on the closing credits than Frederick Treves. So did I imagine that? But I don't know why it would have stuck in my head as being an odd thing. I remember thinking odd that the two sort of older actors were credited above the young star in the opening titles that I could see, and I could see the cliffs that are in the opening titles that I've just watched on YouTube, which don't mention any actors at all. So I must have just been hallucinating credits. I mean, stranger things have been known to happen, but how weird that anomalous thing was lodged in my head and actually never existed. So there we go. I'm an unreliable witness, even to my own childhood. So who knows what is true? I'm sure what's happened is that it's actually how it was, but somebody timey-wimey has gone and erased that to make it more in keeping with credits today, where older actors aren't credited above younger actors because of some sort of perceived seniority. And I'm not sure the world's any better now that doesn't happen. But then again, perhaps it didn't, because Grange Hill always used to list the teachers before the pupils, and I kind of approved of that slightly. The adults before the young people. But that clearly never happened with Bratfarah, and my mind has completely made it up, and I've kind of just gone back and realised that perhaps I'm living a lie. Is that the first sign that I'm some kind of sleeper agent and my entire history is a work of fiction? Oh my God. Okay, well, there we go. So I think you'll find I'm some sort of extraterrestrial assassin. Great. Thanks very much for listening to this omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest for Meglos was the champion of the damned himself, Frazer Gregory, who can be found on Twitter at Felix Frazer, or Felix Frazer. I did the Latin first. And I'm grateful to Fraser and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Paul Carnahan, Alex Kafajoglu, Robbie C., Robin Bland, Gary Byrne, David Bickley, James Bell, Luke Atkins, Kevin Ashelford, John Arnold, Kat Armitage, Andrew and Lisa, Frank Shales, Risto Matti Sarillo, Barry Platt, Adam Parker, Michael Page, Graham Knott, Kevin Murdoch, Roland Moore, Nathan Martin, Philip Marsh, Ian K. McLachlan, Joe Llewellyn, Ashley Knight, Ian Key, Chris Hyam, Paul Harris, Siobhan Galichon, Jason Gorman, Susie Ferguson, Paul Dunn, Chris Dunford-Kelk, John Deere, Grant Davidson, Peter Chamberlain, Richard Chalk, Paul Cook, Nigel Bromley, Josh Bernard and Tim Arding. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If one of the things that would bring joy to your life would be to have your name read out on the credits of a Happy Times and Places or another Toby Haydock's Time Travels podcast, then you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. And that is the only way you can ensure that happens, by becoming a patron for as little as £3 per month. I mean, you can do the Patreon for £0, but you don't get your name read out. You do get the odd post that is made available to you. I'm not quite sure still what I'm doing with free members, although their support is welcome. The more people in that little community, the better. But I haven't quite figured it out yet. What I have figured out, though, is if you pay £3 or upwards, there are other tiers, but all the goodies are available at the lowest financial tier, which is £3 per month. I've said that a number of times now. If I had £1 for every time I'd said £3, I'd have £3. I could become my own patron. You get advance releases 6 months ahead now, again, for Happy Times and Places episode releases, and a couple of months at least, usually for the other podcasts. But you also get exclusive podcasts just for you at Patreon, one called Far Too Much Information, which is a sister to Too Much Information, and also monthly Ask Me Anything AMAs, plus looks behind the scenes at various Blu-ray and DVD extras that I've done, interviews from my archive, and all sorts of other things, plus a chance to give your comments on the episodes, which will then get read out during the appropriate Happy Times and Places. If you don't want to subscribe monthly, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock and do a one-off donation whenever you like. And a Doctor Who VIP did that recently, and I was very, very touched and flattered. He thought he'd done it anonymously, so when I emailed him to say thank you, he said, I thought it was anonymous, but it said his email address, which has his name in it. Anyway, his secret, I promised him, is safe with me, but I've just had my cake and eaten it there, haven't I? And if you want to support without doing so financially, well, that is also extremely appreciated. Just listening is support, of course, but tell your friends, spread it by word of mouth, but also by word of cyberspace, with in the form of a 5-star review wherever you can, wherever you get your podcasts, and also perhaps a few lines to say what you like about the shows. That tweaks the old algorithms and makes people more aware of these and makes them visible, which makes the effort worthwhile, I hope. So yes, please do that. Spread the word wherever you can. I'm on all of the social media places. I'm on Twitter, although I've just taken the app off my phone in an attempt not to waste my life doom scrolling and reminding myself of what a horrid world it is, and getting vexed by Russian bots who are there deliberately just to make us cross, which is the opposite of what this podcast sets out to do. So anyway, but I am on Twitter, but I will check it less frequently, I hope, in 2026. And I'm on Instagram at toby.haydoke. I have a Facebook page as well where you can follow my work. And my comedy club has a Blue Sky account. It's at XS Malarkey, capital X, capital S Malarkey, with a capital M as well, actually, and is in Manchester every Tuesday night. So do please come and support that. It's, again, another attempt to throw joy into the world and charge as little as possible whilst doing so. It takes me as long to put these omnibuses together, I think, as it does to actually make an episode, which is counter to what they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be a way of me bunging something that existed together and just slightly repackaging it and sort of eating up a release. But as it turns out, these get more downloads than the single episodes. So what I thought was a bit of a cheapskate thing is more popular than the general release. I guess people like to not have to change that, every hour. These are for very long car journeys. So hello, I hope you're reaching your destination. Although if you've chosen Meglos, they're the shortest episodes, aren't they? So I hope it's only a small jaunt. They certainly won't accompany you all the way to your holiday destination. But of course, when I chop them together, I get rid of all the post-credits. And for these, because I feel I should be doing something new, I record new openings and closings. This is new. This is as recorded on the 14th of January, 2026, whereas the podcast itself, I thought I'd done an omnibus of Meglos. This one has slipped through the cracks. Some later ones have been done as omnibuses already, and I only thought I'll search omnibus on the website feed page just to make sure I've done them all. There were loads missing, so I've just So anyway, and there were loads that the patrons had that I hadn't released for non-patrons, so they've come out in a right old higgledy-piggledy order in non-Patreonville. Anyway, while I was cutting this one together, I noticed I had to go way back into episode 3 to chop off whatever I chopped off, and I don't listen back. And I think sometimes there are running themes with the post-credits, or I refer to stuff that's happened in the previous recording or whatever. But anyway, I noticed the one for Meglos episode 3 was especially long, and I just couldn't bring myself to delete it. So I'm gonna paste it after this. I don't know what's on it, but it is an example of what happens, of what you can hear if you listen to the single episodes, the sort of gold that gets lopped off, that gets Pamela Nashed in the course of making these omnibus editions. And you see, I could keep the post-credit stuff, but you'd have the whole of the theme tune. I suppose I could chop the theme tune out, but then you still get the plugs for the patron and all of that. And I think it's right to do the omnibuses as just the episode content, but it means you do lose the post-credits gold. The post-credit stuff shouldn't be gold, though, should it? It should only be extra, because I was going to say fewer people listen to it, and we have discovered over the course of 2025 that quite a lot of people stay to the bitter, bitter end. Anyway, here's what you could have won had you listened to episode 3 of Meglos in Happy Times and Places. So episode 68.3 of Happy Times and Places. I don't know if it'll make any sense out of context at all, but here's what it was. And thanks for listening to this one. And happy 2026. Although I don't know when in 2026 this is going out, because I'm having a day of sweeping up all the omnibuses that I really thought I'd done. I don't have a system. That's the problem. This is how episodes come in at 19 minutes. It's when you're very disorganized and think you've done something that you haven't. So anyway, there's some enunciated admin for what it's worth. Now here's what you could have won. if you're anything like me, you'll find that onions can be a bit difficult, except that I now sign up to Weekly Onions, where I get my onions delivered straight to my door, and they take all the complications out of the modern onion consumer's day, of which I've always counted myself to. Do you see what you're avoiding if you go to patreon.com/Toby. Well, no, you're not avoiding that. You don't get that on these podcasts. I do not advertise on these podcasts because my heart always sinks a little. I'm doing it now. I'm doing what the advert people do. Doesn't your heart always sink a little when you listen to a podcast from somebody you respect, and then they have to pretend that they personally like a thing they've been given money to advertise? But of course, because it's a podcast, they do the personal touch. Go, and I use it, and I can't believe it's the best shave I've ever had. And would you say if it wasn't? Of course you wouldn't. They've just given you some pounds. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the artifice that I can't drum up. I can't do. And also, it's just not my scene or my style. And that's not to say it's a virtue. I admire very much those people. I've not been offered. Now, let me say, hang on. This is also, I've not been offered. Nobody's come knocking at my door and saying, please, can you endorse my family-friendly genocide? You know, my or whatever it is they want to give. Nobody, you know, I'm not somebody worth hanging trinkets upon in order to make them look more attractive. But I think there are ways that podcasts can get advertising for money, but I prefer to do and maybe there's not. No, I'm sure there is, because I listen to podcasts. That's not what I'm doing here. I am instead just asking for money. The way that podcasts work these days, if somebody is a creative person and puts something out there, they put it out there for free. You may well be listening to this on iTunes where it's free. I'm very cool about that, and I love the fact that, you know, as a person who makes things, you can just really easily, because I'm a simpleton, put it out there and people can listen to it, and a lot of you do, and I'm really grateful. That's the main thing. That's the headline. Thanks for listening, but also buy my onions. But if you are one of those people that wants to subsidize some of the stuff that you enjoy and consume, consider going to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where you could have heard these words 6 months earlier than you're hearing them now if you're listening on iTunes, because Happy Times and Places is 6 months ahead. You could also have heard your name being read on the credits there. I know, amazing. Look at what you're being offered. But there is also access to a unique Patreon-only podcast called Far Too Much Information, and the Patreon-only Ask Me Anythings, which are once a month, but if I get asked lots of questions, there's about 3 editions of those, and people seem to listen to those. It's bizarre. And there's videos and stuff from my archive and all sorts of other stuff. And that's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. Another way of doing it where you're not committing yourself to a monthly obligation, because Patreon is a monthly thing. You can pay from £3 a month. You can get a 10% discount if you pay for a year in advance, but you can also ascend up the tiers. But all of the audio and video content is available to every single tier. At entry level. But you could also go to kofi.com/Toby Haydock, where you don't get anything except the satisfaction of chucking some money my way if I've done something you particularly like. Like if I was busking on the tube and you were feeling of a particularly sunny disposition towards somebody doing a Mick Hucknall cover at Old Kent Road or wherever. And this is my own Old Kent Road. My Mick Hucknall cover is a monologue about episode 3 of Meglos. I've been holding back the tears, and I haven't been holding back the years though. Gosh, I remember it from when it was first on. And also what you can do to support if you don't want to or can't financially. And I totally get that. Times are tough. The world is going crazy. We're spiraling into all sorts of national and international debt, and everything is going up and nothing works properly. So do you know what? I'm just happy if this distracts you from that for a bit. He says, now just reminding everybody. But if you want to show your appreciation, you can do so in a very straightforward way that costs you nothing apart from a little bit of your time, which is to go to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, anywhere online, and give these 5 stars. 5 stars really help. and a few lines of review to let people know what they're in store for. That is the sort of stuff that points people in the direction of these podcasts and gets more listeners, which of course, is more fun for me. So if you could do that and just spread the word with a word via cyberspace, and indeed word of mouth. Spread the world. Go on. Yeah, start a chain letter. Do whatever you like. Write it in the sand. Write Toby Haydock's Time Travels in the sand next to your SOS. Whatever, paint it on the white cliffs of Dover. Chip away at the Mount Rushmore and make it all my face. Do anything, just any little thing to help spread the word about Toby Haydock's Time Travels, and I would be very grateful. And those places on cyberspace include Twitter, where I'm on there at Toby Haydock. These podcasts have their own feed at Haydock Podcasts. I'm also a stand-up comedian by trade during the day. It's at night time, particularly at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club in Manchester, which begins at 8 p.m. every Tuesday. If you've got any mates in Manchester, it's been running for 26 years. It's highly regarded. We've always got a fantastic array of comics on, and it's a nice, safe, comfortable space to enjoy creative and artistic endeavour that is designed to tickle your fancy. And there's the theme. I'll let the theme do its thing. That was actually very fancy. I got interrupted because I have the... Well, I'm doing this in a slightly different way. I was going to reserve this for episode 4, where I might need to make the time last a little bit longer. These are the first ones, episodes 2, 3, and probably 4 of Meglos. I'm recording straight onto GarageBand, where I've normally recorded them on Audacity and then moved them over to GarageBand. But Audacity started to sort of have dropouts in place. Well, it used to have dropouts, but it used to show the dropouts, so I'd be able to replace them with my backup recording, which was a fiddle, but it meant I could see where the dropouts were, because I don't like having to listen back to the whole thing just in case a syllable drops out. So I need to see the dropouts, but it stopped showing the dropouts now. And I only noticed a few dropouts recently when I did too much information, because I have to listen to those back to do quite a complicated edit. But I don't want to listen to these back. Who wants to listen to me rabbiting on about Doctor Who in an unstructured way? How embarrassing. But that means I can't tell if there's any dropouts, so I can't risk that with Audacity, which for some reason I believe does a better recording. I don't know. But anyway, to avoid the dropouts, I'm doing this on GarageBand, which I normally edit on, to see if there's a change in quality. So is this any worse quality than Meglos 1? Than any of the other previous Happy Times and Places? Now, I normally do the credits and the plugs and this post-credits bit. They're normally recorded straight into GarageBand. But the main track, the commentary itself, is normally done on Audacity. So is there a difference? Is there a difference between the quality of those bits and the main recording? I don't know. Who knows? I know Audacity records onto a WAV, and this comes out then as an MP3. Does a WAV changing it into an MP3, is that better quality than just recording this and turning it into an MP3? I don't know. But anyway, that's what I'm doing to avoid the dropouts, because I don't think I've ever had any dropouts on GarageBand. Am I right to be recording? This could be a major sound person's faux pas. I do Audacity because I use that sort of professionally. And I've got somebody double checking and at the other end and blah de blah. But anyway, because I normally actually professionally I record down the line and I back up with Audacity. But Audacity has been a bit glitchy. It's always been a bit glitchy, but now it's stopped showing the dropouts. But a sound guy I know has sent me a link to some better software, so I might start using that. But I didn't want to experiment on new software now. Is this interesting? I don't know. I think Frazer is one of the few people that actually listens right to the end. So this is the sort of thing that this is the beast you've created yourself, Frazer. So anyway, yes. So but anyway, I thought I did something clever there, because I have the music stings lurking, because I've got a sort of vague template. I normally stick them right at the end and then sort of move them forward where I need them to break up these last few bits. But obviously I hadn't put that last sting far enough back. I obviously didn't think I'd have been talking this long for a short episode like Meglos Part 3. And that piece of music kicked in, but then instead of stopping and doing it, did you see I sort of brought it up so that the sting that came in under me talking, which is the noise coming from my computer, I then faded up into the track itself. That, coming from me, I don't exactly have silicon fingers, is I think a nifty piece of editing. So I'll be dining out on that with all my robot friends for the next many weeks. I'll stick on "Daydream in Blue," that song about being a robot, and I'll tell them, well, you know what I did with me GarageBand music interface fading up thing. Anyway, I quite liked that bit. I liked how that worked. I'm pleased I was able to get myself out of trouble with a little bit of nifty level manipulation, which is what all the professionals call it. So for me and Meglos, and for now GarageBand, I hope you liked our little robotic coda.